Chapter 942. When Old Hand and Jiang Zhong stepped into the living room on the deck, they saw that the place had completely transformed into a workshop. On that day, Mr. Amo, who was thousands of miles away, had completely unfurled the 3 second edition exoskeleton frames while they were chatting and laughing merrily by the lakeside. One was placed in front of him. One was draped over his body. On the tatami mats and the table, there was a torn piece of clothing. The virtual work area had a rough outline of a structural design, as well as the sketches of various spare parts, modules, and so on. Aside from the main frame, everything else was switching at high speeds. It was a dazzling sight. Mr. Amo himself appeared to be relatively calm. He crossed his arms in front of his chest, sat cross-legged, and gazed at the virtual work area. He didn't make any movements, but his eyeballs would occasionally swivel. He should be thinking. Jiang Zhong's gaze couldn't help but look around the living room, which had practically lost its ability to receive guests. Only then did he cast an inquiring gaze toward Old Hand. What he meant was, "Is this Mr. Amo like this in private?" Old Hand nodded imperceptibly. At the very least, when they interacted normally, they mainly discussed technology and researched. Of course, perhaps he simply treated you as a technician. There was no need to bicker with you in other fields. Mr. Amo was extremely focused. He didn't pay attention to the two. Inlu, who had led them in, was not surprised by this sort of scene. She calmly found a place where she could stand and invited Old Hand and Jiang Zhong to take their seats. Since she still had matters to attend to, she excused herself and Mr. Amo left. Snake Tongue played the role of a maid. She offered short tables, tea, desserts, and so on to the two of them. Her attitude was humble, and her standards were rather high. She made up for Mr. Mo's arrogance that came from being overly focused. The two of them were somewhat overwhelmed by the favor. When they were seated, Jiang Zhong sensed that Mr. Mo's current attitude was a bit different from what he expected. He furrowed his brows as he pondered on how to cut in. As for Old Hand, he adapted to this situation much earlier than Jiang Zhong. He took a sip of tea, took out the bone material requested, and placed it on the short table. Snake Tongue came over on her own, took it, and sent it over to Luo Nan. After that, the veteran looked around the living room, especially the situation of the 3 exoskeletons in the living room. He tried to find clues in Mr. Mo's train of thought to prepare for future processing and adjustments. The first thing he noticed was a very strange detail. From his angle, he could see that Mr. Mo's body was actually in a semi-suspended state. He was supported by the exoskeleton frame, and there was a distance of nearly 10 centimeters between him and the tatami below. Looking at it in detail, the exoskeleton frame that was half hidden in the shadow of Luo Nan's body did not appear to be a stable and firm structure. Instead, it was in the midst of constant change. In front of him was the lower ring-shaped frame, and a second later, it turned into a drooping arm support joint. Next, it might be the half-disassembled load-bearing unit of the spine. Sometimes even the veteran couldn't clearly see what it was. The only thing he could confirm was that these supporting points were all parts of the exoskeleton frame. They were under Mr. Mo's control, constantly mobilizing and adjusting. They were in a highly active state. Of course, the exoskeleton frame itself had a relatively fixed form. No matter how active it was, there was a limit. The changes had a boundary. And during the process of active switching, the frame would occasionally sway and lose balance. However, Mr. Amo was always able to quickly find a balance. Even if there was only a sharp point of contact and the position was not in the center of gravity, it didn't stump him. The veteran seemed to understand something as he watched this scene. Mr. Amo opened his mouth to speak at this time. The balance test can be considered a good way to examine the physical structure of the exoskeleton system. It's simple and easy to use. It's not expensive. The veteran had already entered a state of mind. He leaned forward slightly and asked, "Then, do you think there are any problems with this version? I see that you've always been testing the flexibility of the mimicry changes. Is there a problem?" The problem isn't small. Luo Nan wore Mr. Mo's face and faced the cautious face of the veteran. He grinned and said, "But this is my problem. It's the problem of my eyes suddenly becoming sharper and sharper. In the eyes of the current Luo Nan, or to be exact, in the eyes of the Luo Nan who had gone through 70 hours of high-intensity training as a maintenance soldier in the repeater station of Planet Vanguard 4 and lived in actual combat, regardless of whether it was the second version that already possessed the actual object or the third version that was still in the state of a blueprint. The overall idea was that the mimicry transformation was the main functional requirement. It was possible to use it as an auxiliary line and mounting module to construct a perfect body. But there were far too many unsatisfactory areas on the level of detail. All the problems could be summed up in one point: crude. Too crude. The exoskeleton frame before Luo Nan's eyes had practically every design, every structure, every module, every accessory, and even the operational logic. It could be found in the enormous and rigorous creation system of the heavenly Yuan Empire. Moreover, it was a more perfect and mature plan. Actually, there was no need to flip through the database. Luo Nan had experienced the most commonly used classical structures under his high-intensity training. They far surpassed the exoskeleton in terms of stability and reliability. Even if there were material limitations and a certain degree of incomparability, the difference between the two was as great as the distance between Vanguard 4 and the Crimson will rift from the perspective of pure design philosophy. It didn't need to cross galaxies, but it should be measured in light years. Luo Nan's state of mind was quite good. He even patiently explained to the veteran, "The design of the actual object and the design of the configuration are different. This is an old truth, right? The problem is that I looked at it too shallowly before, sinking from the configuration to the material plane and then completing the corresponding design of the actual object. There really is an enormous amount of knowledge involved." For example, instructor Shengzhan of the repeater station. Half of his reputation as a master was bestowed upon him by his achievements in the sinking stage. This was an area that Luo Nan wasn't good at. The more ideal his configuration design was, the more eye-catching the whimsical aspects of the actual object's design would be. The majority of the reason why he was able to reach the standards of the second and third versions was the result of Dean Wan's forceful correction and leveling. Luo Nan had a general idea of this before, but there were many times when he couldn't change it. Now that he had the blessings of a maintenance soldier at the repeater station, he understood it even more clearly. He also had a clearer direction. Time was very tight. Wasting time was very shameful. But as long as there was a direction, everything was acceptable. Let's talk about the changes to the fourth version first. Why is it the fourth version? It's because the third version is dead in my mind. Luo Nan laughed out loud, proving that his mood was quite good. Part of it was to pacify the overly nervous mind of the veteran. The conflict by the lakeshore and the unforeseen changes in the background would more or less have an impact on them. Luo Nan had to take care of the veteran, who was friends with his grandfather, the veteran of the Hengduan 7 tribes. The veteran relaxed a bit, but he didn't dare to treat Luo Nan lightly. He turned on the recording function of his wristband and listened attentively. At this time, Jiang Zhong gave a slight bow and spoke softly, "Apologies. I'm going to the restroom." This was clearly to avoid arousing suspicion. Luo Nan didn't mind at first, but Jiang Zhong had the intention. He wouldn't refuse, so he nodded. Snake Tongue understood and went forward to greet him. Jiang Zhong had already stood up by now. He turned around and politely thanked Luo Nan before following Snake Tongue. A woman's time in the restroom could always be easily adjusted. She could look at herself in the mirror and touch up her makeup. It wasn't a problem for her to go from 5 minutes to 50 minutes. However, Jiang Zhong wasn't someone who was used to carrying cosmetics on her. She had come here today because she had heard the news from the veteran. The two of them directly left the workplace. She was only wearing her everyday light clothes. In the eyes of some people, this was already quite rude. Jiang Zhong just washed her face and stared blankly into the mirror. Several droplets of water splashed onto the surface of the mirror, reflecting an ordinary and intellectual face. Her eyes were dazed for a moment. Only then did he recognize that it was him. His fingers slid down from his cheeks, slowly moving to his neck and then along his collarbone to his shoulder. On his thin and slightly stiff shoulder, he could feel the texture of the fabric, but there was also an additional force silently pulsating there. A rhythmic knocking sounded on the door. Jiang Zhong instantly came back to reality. He hastily wiped away the remaining droplets of water on his cheeks, adjusted his breathing, and opened the door. He spoke to Snake Tongue at the door. "Apologies. I've kept you waiting." Snake Tongue bowed slightly. She was still like a dutiful maid. However, the words that flowed from her lips and teeth at this moment had more or less surpassed her status. "Mrs. Jiang is quite familiar with the layout of this place." Jiang Zhong was a bit startled. He immediately replied, "It's because this yacht used to be under Mr. Matsudaira's name. I've come here a few times." "Yes, Mr. Matsudaira Yoshio is Mrs. Jiang's investor. Have the two of you known each other for a long time?" "Yes, quite a long time." Jiang Zhong unconsciously sighed as he spoke. "It looks like this is a story related to friendship." "I spoke too much for a moment. Customer, please don't mind." Snake Tongue didn't say anything else. She took small, traditional steps and raised her hand to lead the way for Jiang Zhong. Soon, the two of them returned to the messy living room. Luo Nan and the veteran were already nearing the end of their conversation. I need to finalize it within 6 hours. I know this isn't easy, but I still need to do it. Just like before, I'll first build a test machine. I'll pile one up regardless of the cost." Luo Nan really did have an urgent need for an exoskeleton frame. After all, the perfect body was the prerequisite for his current strongest state, especially since his soul strength had been completely consumed and needed time to replenish. He needed to be by his side at all times. 6 hours. 6 hours it is. The veteran didn't know what sort of environment Luo Nan was in after he delivered the 3 exoskeleton frame version 2 equipment. He didn't know what sort of life Luo Nan had lived through, nor did he know what sort of challenges he would face in the future. But as he communicated with Mr. M.O., he gradually discovered that the small tacit understanding he had built up with Mr. M.O. over the past few days was torn apart. He needed to wring his almost dry brain to squeeze out more nutrients to keep up with the pace of this powerful and mysterious client. His expression was a bit bitter right now, but the toughness he had polished in the wilderness prevailed. He gritted his teeth and agreed. "There's also the syncopator. This needs to be faster." During this time, Luo Nan had already seen the sample of the process bones that the veteran had brought over. After Dean Wan's technological improvements, there were no problems applying it to the syncopator, and the classic design of the syncopator had its own blueprint, so he didn't need to worry about it. The matters related to production and manufacturing came to an end. With a slight thought, the deformed exoskeleton frame on his body was taken off. Snake Tongue came over to sort out. Jiang Zhong had already taken his seat once more at this time. Luo Nan turned his face to face Jiang Zhong. He got straight to the point. "Director Jiang, you've been waiting for a long time. I heard that you were looking for me." Jiang Zhong bowed. "Please forgive me for taking the liberty to disturb you, sir." Luo Nan laughed. "I wouldn't go so far as to disturb you." He sized up Jiang Zhong as he spoke. It was said that this woman was quite accomplished in the field of genome engineering. She was also engaged in experiments that violated ethics. No matter how one looked at her, she was an introverted and shy woman. She was a typical technician who wasn't good at socializing. The polite words at the tip of her tongue were stiff. For her to specially come looking for him under these circumstances could only mean that the matter she wanted to express was extremely important. At least this was the case for her. Luo Nan was a bit curious. He said, I know that you and Master Show are partners in close contact. With this layer of relationship, we don't need to be too polite. Just speak your mind and increase efficiency. Yes. Thank you. Mr. Mo. Zhong took a deep breath and bowed once more. This time, the extent was even greater. I've come this time in hopes of obtaining the tissue sample of Mr. Mo's summoned creature, the mushed-mouth ape. Please. Chapter 943. Jiang Zhong's voice trembled slightly at the end of her words, but the words that came out of her mouth were still expressed clearly. The most important thing was that the contents of her words were truly unexpected. Luo Nen never expected that she would make such a request. He subconsciously looked at the veteran. The veteran had just arranged a production task for the factory. He saw Mr. Mo cast a gaze at him. What else could he do but smile bitterly? This was interesting. Speaking of which, ever since Luo Nen publicly summoned the mushed-mouth ape, this was the first person to come knocking and ask for it. It must be known that this was a key target linked to the new plane. Who knew how many people were drooling over the idea of getting their hands on it? But they were intimidated by the power displayed by Mr. Mo, and the fact that the summoned creature came and went without a trace. They could only watch helplessly from the side. What kind of path did Jiang Zhong have? She actually came knocking on his door like this? Luo Nen felt that this was a bit absurd. He laughed and asked her, Director Jiang, is this request of yours personal in nature or business? Personal, Jiang Zhong blurted out in response. Oh, so it's like this. Luo Nen declined to comment. Luo Nen knew about the conversation between Snake Tongue and Jiang Zhong. Snake Tongue's actions were carried out under his tacit approval. However, this lady's position was far too vague. It was just like the appearance and temperament she displayed. They were separated by a layer of faintly discernible mist. It was like Luo Nan himself was covered by a veil of invisibility. Luo Nan decided to start with the most basic of questions. Director Jiang, you've seen Yuan X. Oh, this is what I call the mushed-mouth ape. You should have heard me say it when you were next to me. Its volume isn't small, but it's an energized existence. What do you mean by a tissue sample? Jiang Zhong felt that she had already crossed a bottleneck when she wasn't blasted out by Mr. Mo on the spot. The nervousness in her heart eased a bit. She gently adjusted her breathing to make her voice a bit clearer. Mr. Mo, it's like this. I observed the mushed-mouth ape back then. It possessed an overall structural stability on the material plane. I have mastered a technique that allows me to cut out a basic unit from the bottom of the structure. I can preserve the basic structural properties without damaging the entirety of the structure, and I can maintain it for a certain amount of time for research. Luo Nan was astonished. You had ideas about it back then. Jiang Zhong was a little embarrassed. He lowered his head and said, I've considered it. After all, it's related to my research. Luo Nan ran a circle through his mind. It was said that different professions were worlds apart. He didn't quite understand what Jiang Zhong's so-called technology was. He also didn't know the specific contents of her research. He just felt that this didn't seem to be the field of genome engineering. You're researching the mushed-mouth ape or a similar mutant. It's hard to say if this thing is considered a mutant. According to his understanding of the lousy-mouth ape, this kind of pure energy structure was more like an idealized collection of configurations. If he were to do it, he would have to start from the thinking of configurations and dismantle it from top to bottom or from bottom to top in order to keep the meaningful parts. Obviously, this was not going to be easy. From top to bottom, it was like decomposing a large number into prime factors with bare hands. At first glance, the principle seemed easy to understand, but when the quantity and complexity of the number exceeded the threshold, the human brain would explode. Going from the bottom to the top was very likely to get lost in the maze of the basic structure of the configuration, wasting brain time and energy, only to find that after going around in a circle, they were back to the starting point. What method did Jiang Zhong use to research? However, Jiang Zhong denied this aspect. Ah, no, I'm not researching any type of mutant, but I do have a need to collect samples of diversity. Luo Nen was curious. What kind of specific direction? Jiang Zhong responded without the slightest hesitation. The ecology of the distributed mutant gene network. It's the design of an ecological network built on the basis of genetic diversity. We hope to use the genes of mutants on a large scale as the basic level. We hope to stimulate a new and higher level through their sufficient connection, cooperation, learning, and competition in the form of extraordinary power. Luo Nan frowned. It sounds a bit like an artificial neural network. Actually, they both adopt the mathematical model of a sparse and distributed network. However, there will be differences in the application. The academic discussion stopped here. Luo Nen had no intention of getting too involved in this unfamiliar field. Otherwise, he might make a fool of himself. He caught onto another key word. You said we. This doesn't seem like a private request. Is the Songping Research Institute still operating? I remember that they've been selling their assets all this time. They feel that the limelight has passed, so they're starting to fill in again? Jiang Zhong was a bit nervous when she saw Luo Nan's doubt. She explained, I don't understand the operation of the Great Zay Order. I'm asking for a tissue sample for the sake of the following research. Of course, it has nothing to do with the Great Zay Order. As far as I know, the research institute you're in is privately funded by Matsudaira Yoshio. This research project. I brought it with me. Jiang Zhong's rebuttal blurted out, but there was a stumble in the middle. It dispelled her emotions more or less. Then her voice weakened a bit, but it was still a lot harder than before. I've already signed an agreement with the research institute. They've only obtained the patent related to the field of directional induction for this project. The rest is still with me. That should be the most valuable part. Research results often keep a distance from should. Veteran coughed over and over to the side. Jiang Zhong finally came to her senses. Her emotions had gotten to her head. Her face was a bit pale. She tried to apologize, but she didn't know what to say for a time. On the other side, Luo Nan saw that Jiang Zhong was so nervous that her fists were clenched, but her body movements were still forcefully not falling apart. The key thing was that veteran was smiling at the side. He looked at Luo Nan with an impatient expression. Luo Nan's heart softened, and he eased up with a sentence. Never mind. I'm not interested in how you guys sign the agreement. If it's the employer behind you, it'll be a bit interesting. Employer? Jiang Zhong was still too nervous, so much so that she was a bit slow. Veteran comforted her again. Mr. Mo, are you talking about the LCRF? Jiang Zhong immediately reacted. Indeed, with the level of strength displayed by Mr. Mo, the size of the Great Zay Order was indeed not within the scope of his attention. Those that could be linked to him were certainly of a higher level. For example, behind Matsudaira Yoshio's private research institute was an even larger investment organization, the LCRF, which was also known as the Life Cycle Research Fund. Luo Nen had diverted the topic. Veteran was naturally willing to cooperate. He intentionally used chatter to ease up the atmosphere. I'd say that the LCRF isn't very interested in Jiang Zhong's research. The uncertainties are too strong, and it's a long and drawn-out project. It's been over 20 years from the beginning until now. It's not that there aren't any results, but there hasn't been a single person who's been able to prolong their lives. Those fellows who are older and weaker than me are probably just waiting to die if they really rely on this. The rest of them can't wait any longer. Veteran laughed heartily as he spoke. Luo Nen laughed as well. What the veterans were referring to was the mockery of the ability users' sense of superiority towards the previous generations who had great capital and power but could not activate supernatural powers, and ended up kneeling before diseases and death and weeping their hearts out. He spoke again, from the Wilderness Laboratory to Quantum Corporation. They've been fighting for 3 days, even if they don't have dates. They're really going crazy from hunger. Luo Nen added in his mind, from the safe trade zone of Ban City to the deep blue world. Ever since the era of distortion, especially after the appearance of powerful mythical existences like ability users and extraordinaries, those in power who were unable to catch up were driven mad with jealousy on one hand. On the other hand, they discovered the hope of prolonging their lives and vitality. Under the provocation of hope, a considerable portion of this group of people lost their composure. They did things more and more aggressively, disregarding everything. The LCRF was one of the batons they used to wield the power of capital. They had become more and more anxious in the past few years. At the same time, Luo Nen discovered a few emotional triggers from veterans' words. Master Shou has had dealings with the LCRF before. Me. I don't have the qualifications. I've just seen a few things. It's all from a long time ago. In the past. It was when we were in the wilderness. It's a pity that it doesn't seem like friendship. Luo Nan's mind suddenly froze when he spoke to this point. He felt that it was a bit familiar. He looked at Jiang Zhong across from him and remembered that this was a bit similar to the words Snake Tongue had said to him a few minutes ago. The trigger was friendship, but the key word was a time expression like in the past. Luo Nan's eyes narrowed. He paid attention to it in secret, but he didn't delve deeper into this field. He just casually made a summary. The claws of capital really are unfathomable. Veteran laughed. Clearly, Mr. M.O. had forgotten that he controlled the Blood Flame Order and the Castle Financial Group, which was even more famous in the secular world. They were also outstanding and famous capital powers. From this, it could be seen that Mr. M.O. didn't place his position on the side of capital. This was in line with his usual behavior, making Veteran feel closer to him. He wanted to strike while the iron was hot and help Jiang Zhong speak up. But Mr. M.O. shook his head. Honestly speaking, Director Zhang's research project has nothing to do with me. But if it involves the mushed-mouth ape, this very moment is far too sensitive. Veteran had already automatically entered the role of a lobbyist. He humbly asked for guidance. You're saying, I don't know how much you guys understand about this matter, but the current public situation is this. The mushed-mouth ape is involved in the secrets of a new plane. If its tissue sample can really be dismantled and leaked out, Luo Nen raised his hand to stop Jiang Zhong's inclination to swear an oath. I'm saying that even if only the news is leaked out, who knows what those fellows who stare at the new plane day in and day out to the point that their eyes turn green from staring at it. Luo Nen cast his gaze at Jiang Zhong. Think about it. If you get this tissue sample, maybe when you get off the yacht, that go to Masayoshi. Oh, even if he doesn't exist, there can still be Satoshi Mai too, Rinswooding, and so on. They can invite you onto the yacht and send you directly to the Amaterasu court. He was joking, but Jiang Zhong and the veteran couldn't bring themselves to laugh. Luo Nan sighed when he saw their expressions. Looking at it from a different angle, Luo Nan really wanted to know whether or not the scientific research institutions of Earth could explore deeper secrets from the mushed-mouth ape's research. Secrets that even he couldn't touch. Yes, he already knew that the cloud world was the product of the interaction between the mist labyrinth and Earth's local spacetime. He even wanted to borrow this basic logic for the virtual plane he would create in the future in order to quickly take shape. But why would a strange species like the mushed-mouth ape appear in the basic and clear structure of the cloud world? This was still an unsolved mystery. If he had a trustworthy research team under his command, he would have given it away by now. Oh, President Ouyang's side was actually pretty good, but it was just as he said before. It was unknown how big of a storm would be stirred if news were to leak out in this sensitive period. Luo Nan's mind stirred slightly when he thought of this. Another thought popped up in his mind. It seemed that stirring up a storm wasn't bad at all. He was somewhat unable to suppress this thought as soon as it appeared. But now wasn't the time to think things through in detail. Luo Nen retracted his attention and faced Veteran once more. Jiang Zhong's expression grew all the more amiable. I discovered this thing by accident. It's not bad to be able to research and discover its deep secrets. However, now clearly isn't the time. Jiang Zhong was already thrown into chaos by Luo Nan's hot and cold attitude. He even doubted the correctness of his request. He looked over in a daze when he heard Luo Nan's words. Luo Nan didn't beat around the bush with her. Let's postpone it for a few days. In the society of commodities, time nodes and sequence are the most suitable for marking prices. A step earlier or a step later will make a huge difference. You guys don't seem to be in a rush to get started right now. Yes, this is a part of the collection. It's used for high-level comparison groups. Jiang Zhong suddenly understood when he spoke to this point. Mr. Mo had agreed. It didn't matter if it was due to the face of veteran or some delaying tactic. For a powerful person of Mr. Mo's status, a promise was certainly better than nothing. Even if she wasn't able to take it back today, it would still be a consolation. A joyous expression appeared on her face. She got up from her seat and bowed deeply in thanks. But she heard Mr. Mo ask a question before she could say words of thanks. What's your segmentation tool? Sorry. I'm talking about the collection tool. Luo Nan clearly used the segmentation tool to his heart's content. Speaking of which, he really did want to use the segmentation tool to cut it and see what the result would be. Unfortunately, he didn't have an advanced artificial intelligence like Aunt Kuei. He also didn't have the enormous database accumulated by the Heavenly Yuan Empire. It would be quite difficult to make a comparison. While he was fantasizing, Jiang Zhong answered without the slightest hesitation. It's a supernatural power that I possess. It's called dissociation. Oh, Luo Nan was a bit surprised. Jiang Zhong really didn't have the slightest hint of an ability user. Even though he could sense a few characteristics, it was very easy to forget or overlook them. Jiang Zhong didn't have the slightest intention of keeping it to himself. He explained seriously, my ability is mainly used to strip complex systems. It's used to generate reactions to stimuli from the external environment. However, it is limited by the complexity and precision of the system and unit. Can you demonstrate it? Of course. Jiang Zhong immediately agreed. Since he was going to experiment, he obviously needed a target. What should he use? Luo Nan's gaze swept over Snake Tongue, but he soon shifted it away. She had enough bad luck these past few days, and she was in front of others. It would be good to give her a bit of face. He himself wasn't suitable. Veteran was a guest. He couldn't really bring out Yuan X. Luo Nan's thoughts spun a few times, and he came up with a plan. He snapped his fingers. It'll be this little thing. Sorry for my lack of manners. As Jiang Zhong spoke, a fingernail-sized, large, ant-like life form appeared on the short table in front of him. It swaggered over. Its entire body was scarlet red, and it reflected the lighting in the living room. It seemed to sparkle with a flame-like luster. Vulcan ant. This was a Vulcan ant that had been transported over from a Vulcan ant nest several thousand kilometers away in the lava caverns. This was a magical technique, and it possessed an inconceivable core. In any case, Veteran and Jiang Zhong were both stupefied as they watched. Luo Nan let out a secret sigh of relief after finishing this task. Right now, the range of his soul cloak had shrunk completely. It couldn't even cover the entire civilian market. The altar spiderweb was a bit rotten, and he needed the wraith sign to work anew to mend it. However, his soul strength was still rapidly proliferating under the special structure of formatting theory. It was far beyond the reach of normal ability users, and it was endlessly recovering. Moreover, his control over the targets he had previously controlled didn't decline at all. This reflected the stability of the dark chains, a fundamental ability. Completing this fixed-point transmission basically clarified the bottom line of his strength. Back to the matter at hand. The Vulcan ant was a social mutant species. It was controlled, small in size and simple in internal structure. It was quite suitable to be used as a target for a demonstration. Luo Nan looked at Jiang Zhong, but Jiang Zhong was stupefied. Is it too small? Ah, no. I've done it before. Jiang Zhong raised his head and quickly swept a glance over. Then he lowered his eyelids. His breathing and heartbeat were a bit chaotic, but he still extended his hand toward the Vulcan ant. The large ant, which seemed to be flowing with a bloody glow, followed along Jiang Zhong's finger under Luo Nan's telepathic command. It climbed all the way up and quickly climbed to the hollow of her palm. Jiang Zhong adjusted her breathing once more. Then she closed her palm and fingers, then separated them a moment later. During this time, the Vulcan ant didn't attack her under Luo Nan's control. It was as if it had completed a checkout mission. It climbed down without any abnormalities. It's done. Jiang Zhong's voice was a bit shaky. Perhaps it was due to the consumption of energy from using her ability. The veteran to the side had already seen this sort of scene many times. He coughed and wanted to open his mouth to explain. But Luo Nan didn't need this. He had already captured the undetectable red in the hollow of Jiang Zhong's palm through his keen perception. This is a parasol sac? From the perspective of the mutant Vulcan ant, the parasol sac was no longer a place to store food. Instead, it was an existence that had mutated into an ammunition warehouse. The semi-finished neurotoxin stored here could form a powerful zombie virus that dominated the target's nervous system through mixing with the secretions from the gland, tail, and other different areas. It could also be used as a stimulant to stimulate the individual's energy. At the same time, it was an important additive for the pheromone needed for collective activities. It could be said to be one of the most critical organs. Luo Nan looked at the Vulcan ant on the short table. It was actually at a loss. Luo Nan nearly applauded. What a marvelous displacement! Upon closer examination, there should be some subtle space-time related elements within. But the most marvelous part was the instantaneous deconstruction and reorganization of the local tissue. Unfortunately, the details were quite chaotic. There seemed to be quite a bit of redundancy. It was yet another black box. Over on Earth, as long as supernatural powers were involved, many had the characteristics of a black box. They knew how, but they didn't know why. In the end, it was because the structure wasn't systematic and the research wasn't deep enough. In any case, this was a very interesting ability. If used properly, it could even be a very terrifying ability. Luo Nan felt that he didn't lose out by being able to see this demonstration. Chapter 944. Old Hand and Jiang Zhong left. As they exited the cabin, they bumped into Yin Lu, who had sent them over. Yin Lu politely wanted to send them off the airship, but they refused. Basically, the two bid farewell in a calm mood. This was in line with Luo Nan's expectations. Sir's heart is too good. Yin Lu said this as soon as she entered. She was suspicious of flattery, but part of it was from the bottom of her heart. She hesitated for a moment before saying, "The human heart is subtle. If Sir's attitude is too kind, it might not be a good thing for them." Luo Nan was arranging the parts around him, trying to piece them back together. He didn't even raise his head when he heard this. Master Shou isn't that kind of person. As for Jiang Zhong, he doesn't seem like one either. His words were uncertain, but his tone was flat. This was because this wasn't the main point of Luo Nan's attention. In comparison, he felt that the relationship between the two was more worth exploring. The friendship between Master Shou and Jiang Zhong is extremely deep. It's not at the level of an ordinary collaborator. Yin Lu pulled out the relevant information. Yes, it's closer than what the information shows. However, Master Shou's Hengduan 7 tribes has a much more tense relationship with Jiang Zhong. Their relationship with Jiang Zhong is the relationship between a researcher and a lab rat. A considerable number of people have a very bad impression of Jiang Zhong. On the day she and Master Shou were kidnapped, some people even suspected that it was a trick she played. Luo Nan's hands didn't stop assembling. He just spoke a bit slower, Under normal logic, even if the researcher felt pity for the lab rat, it's unlikely that the researcher would develop a friendship and relationship with the lab rat. That would be far too difficult. But the facts are there. How did this friendship come about? And when did it come about? Lu roughly grasped Luo Nan's train of thought. She tried to make a judgment. If we exclude some complex physiological and psychological factors, pushing the time forward is more logical. This is before the Hungduan 7 tribes became living materials. They moved to Ban City in the first place to become living materials. Nominally, it was to provide social relief to the nomadic tribes of the wilderness that had suffered from the mutant infection. But in reality, everyone was clear. The research organization of Ban City's trade market wouldn't give them the time and space to make friends. Then we can only push it forward. The wilderness. Luonen said. Le quickly brought up the corresponding information. According to the information from the Great Zay cult, there are rumors that Jiang Zhong was born in the wilderness. At least in the processing plants and research institutes, most people think so. Wilderness. This is the wilderness. Luo Nen paused his assembling actions for a moment. Then he casually swept his hand and cleared the table in front of him, letting the spare parts scatter to the ground. Then he took a fake vertebra joint used on load-bearing ridges and placed it in the middle of the table. What we can be 100% sure of is that before Master Shou came to Ban City, he was in the wilderness in Spring City near the Hungduan mountain range. If Jiang Zhong got to know him in the wilderness, it's most likely here. Luo Nan placed another bionic joint on the table, placing it together with the one representing the veteran. He thought for a bit and separated them a bit. Using a veteran to anchor Jiang Zhong and her range of activities was a little arbitrary, Lu continued. The same source of information indicates that the president of the Dazawa Society, Matsura Yoshio, is a close friend of Jiang Zhong. And it might even be a little ambiguous. The beginning of this relationship should also be in the wilderness. Matsudaira Yoshio, huh? Luo Nen had seen Matsudaira Yoshio's information before. It seemed that Matsudaira Yoshio was a powerful character, but Luo Nan's impression of Matsudaira Yoshio was still fuzzy in his mind. What attracted Luo Nan's attention was that Matsudaira Yoshio had once roamed the wilderness for a considerable amount of time. It was just that Matsudaira Yoshio was very secretive about where he went and what he did. Then again, no matter what sort of person Matsudaira Yoshio was, the friendship forged between him and Jiang Zhong in that complicated and dangerous environment had been tempered for so many years. Most likely it was true friendship. He swept a glance at Snake Tongue. There was still another piece of circumstantial evidence for this matter. Luo Nan's thoughts entered a state of linear deduction. A long time ago, a friend in the wilderness. There were far too many possibilities in terms of specific locations without the anchor point of veteran. However, if Old Hand was added, Luo Nan would have to seek an intersection, and the range would suddenly narrow. But then, Luo Nan picked up another bionic joint and placed it on the table. Could Matsudaira Yoshio and veteran be old acquaintances? There's no evidence to prove this. Yeah. Wouldn't the relationship be too complicated if he followed this line of deduction? Could it be that Jiang Zhong and even Matsudaira Yoshio were old acquaintances? Luo Nan grasped the bionic joint in the palm of his hand and flipped through the external neuron to search for information. In the past, He Wayne had recently asked Dean Lu to search the information market for some information regarding his grandfather Luo Yuandao's scientific research ethics case. He would flip through it when he had nothing to do. Unsurprisingly, there were no records of any connection. And this was the most detailed information Luo Nen could find in the early days. As for the wilderness laboratory stage, it was the late 70s and early 80s. The world government was still in a difficult strategic defense phase against the mutants in the wilderness. They had practically no influence over the refugee powers. Even the intelligence organizations of the inner world didn't have many methods to deal with the chaotic and bloody wilderness. It was very difficult to gather intelligence. After going back and forth many times, Luo Nan felt that it would be better to listen to his aunt Luo Shuqing's memories. Forget it. I'll just pay attention for now. Luo Nan placed the third bionic joint on the edge of the table. He played it down on the surface, but he had already made a decision in his heart. He would wait until his mental plane's condition had more or less recovered. He would start from this angle and completely monitor Jiang Zhong and Matsudaira Yoshio's movements, or he could simply draw up psychic diagrams and attempt divination. He could see if he could erase the uncertainties from the perspective of supernatural powers. Oh, speaking of psychic diagrams, why did he come to Ban City in the first place? With a thought, the exoskeleton frame's contents automatically switched out in Luo Nan's virtual workspace. What replaced it was Luo Nan's newest work in Xia City. It was on this psychic diagram that the luxurious jadeite light cruise ship was tapped and a certain image was drawn. Inla knew that Luo Nan was deep in thought. She carefully controlled her breathing for fear of disturbing him. It was just that every time Luo Nan was deep in thought, there would always be some abnormalities around him. This time, aside from the contents of the virtual workspace being switched, the 3 bionic joints on the table were rolling under the influence of some invisible power until they spun and spun. There was also a blood red and the size of a thumb. It seemed to be the one that had been used as an experimental subject just now. It had crawled back from the opposite table. Unfortunately, its luck tonight was abysmal. It had just climbed onto the table when it was run over by a rolling bionic joint. Perhaps it hit its vitals. In any case, it immediately erupted with a blood-colored flame and was burned to ashes. Luo Nan's gaze locked onto the fire of the fire god ant that exploded and then extinguished, as well as the remaining ashes. He appeared to be deep in thought, and at this time Inla noticed that Snake Tongue was silently retreating. Her eyebrows were knitted together, as if she had encountered some problem. Oh, there were some fluctuations in the mental domain. What's the matter? Even Inla noticed the abnormality on the mental plane. There was no need to talk about Luo Nan. He even confirmed the source of the disturbance. His gaze turned to Snake Tongue, and her figure paused. She lowered her eyes and said softly, reporting to my lord, "It's Zhuo Jiawei calling for help." Oh, Luo Nan had been staying at the trade market for the past few days, which was also the northern shore of Northern Mountain Lake. He had nearly completely forgotten about the big guy on the southern shore. But when Snake Tongue mentioned it, the image of the giant camphor tree spirit immediately appeared in his mind. Calling for help. Oh, I nearly forgot. What's the situation like with the powers of the orders of Order of Ban City these past 2 days? Inlu replied, "They're all unsettled." The Fusang Divine Tree system revealed itself that day, and it scared quite a few people. Plus, everyone says that the true God is in a terrible mood these past 2 days. There are a few more venting barrels and scapegoats in the dark. They're just venting barrels? Luo Nan didn't believe it at all. Speaking of which, what in the world were the Pope and the true God going to set up in Ban City? What were they cooking? The current Luo Nan's insight and knowledge were different from when he first arrived in Ban City. It didn't matter if they were aberrations or whatever. They were born with a spirit, received the power of faith, and could operate and evolve. This was already in the category of fantasy breeds. It wasn't just the Zhuo Jiawei men. According to the taxonomy of species of the Heavenly Yuan Empire, the so-called gods consecrated by the thousands of orders of Order of Ban City could be classified into the category of fantasy breeds. Yes, that's right. In the standard sense, fantasy breeds referred to creatures that didn't have a natural material foundation. They were pure creations of consciousness, desire, and information. However, in the actual process of development, there would often be a trigger in the distorted process of desire and cognition. There were also such examples on Earth, including mountains, rivers, trees, rocks, birds and beasts, natural phenomena, and even ancient sages and heroes. All of these could become the cornerstone of faith. Of course, this was just the initial stage of fantasy breeds. Truly powerful fantasy breeds would inevitably break away from the shackles of concrete objects, physical properties, and images. They would expand their domain of influence as much as possible. For example, the magnetic optical mica. Its original form was very likely to be a white cloud that could be entrusted with one's imagination. However, in the long process of evolution and growth, it accepted more and more elements of imagination and desire from trillions of intelligent life forms. In the end, it was fixed on the space-time element of imagination. It was said that one could see 10,000 kilometers away and wish to fall beyond the heavens. There were also studies that showed that the original form of the magnetic optical mica was an experimental configuration invented by a powerful existence. It was just that it took the shape of a white cloud. Only with an extraordinary foundation could it possess a variety of terrifying abilities that were powerful and extraordinary. Of course, this wasn't within the development of fantasy breeds. Speaking of experiments, Yin Lu and Snake Tongue were ruthlessly abandoned by Luo Nan's train of thought. Luo Nan didn't pay attention to them. He just thought that he seemed to have heard Lian Lu mention something before. In history, fantasy breeds were indeed extremely important research targets. They were a kind of special, transitional element. They themselves had an extremely important meaning. A few relatively clear concepts spun in his mind, and he suddenly hit a certain trigger point. The external neuron's built-in database search function was activated. One professional thesis after another and arranged neatly appeared in Luo Nan's sea of consciousness. Why wasn't he this sensitive in the past? Luo Nan brought back his past self and felt sour about his present self. But after thinking a bit more, he felt that it was reasonable. This sort of telepathic trigger function. If he didn't have the abyss of heaven style of thought, how could the abyss of heaven style of thinking be realized? The most important thing was the content of the relevant materials. Luo Nan relied on the translation function of his secret glyph to hastily sweep through them. At least within the scope of his field of vision, the topics were different. The keywords and introductions were more or less repetitive. Aside from the words fantasy breed, magnetic optical mica, and so on, there were other words like system, kingdom of God, medium, precondition, and so on. Did I search them? Luo Nan's gaze fell upon the article at the very top of the list. Configuration, faith, and great limit. The rational reconstruction of historical evolution from ignorance to dawn. The magnetic optical mica chapter. Oh, I feel like this is a large work. A part of it, Luo Nan noticed this. Aside from being at the very top of the list, there was also the word configuration at the very top. But before he could translate the introduction a step further, he first noticed the author. This was a name that he wasn't familiar with, but he was rather sensitive to some time ago. Azure and Blue. Jean. Holy crap. Chapter 945. Jean, he, the Lord of Jean, he. For Luo Nan, who had just left the relay station, this was already a symbolic name. It was the most important landmark in the history of the Heavenly Yuan Empire. There was no other. Luo Nan's knowledge of the Lord of Jean, his life, was still rather vague due to the severe limitations of his knowledge regarding sacrifice. All he knew was that he was the founder of the Heavenly Yuan Empire, one of the most powerful beings in the universe. In fact, in the history of the Heavenly Yuan Empire, there was nothing wrong with the label of the Lord of Jean, he being the most powerful being. Luo Nan's lack of knowledge regarding the history of the Heavenly Yuan Empire could only allow his thoughts to diverge to this degree. It was quite impossible for his eyes to be brimming with tears for the legacy of the founding emperor. Then he thought of something more realistic. Authority. Such a character. Such a large card. The external neurons, strict authority settings. Were there no restrictions in this aspect? Luo Nan didn't feel that there were too many authority restrictions in the relay station. It wasn't that the restrictions were loose. Instead, within the precise and complete system, many meaningless reminders or obstacles had already become formless. If you couldn't see it, then you couldn't see it. Basically, you wouldn't be given a corresponding mission. However, Luo Nen had soaked in it for a long time. He had a certain understanding of the authority of the heavenly Yuan Empire. It could be said that there were differences in levels. From Luo Nan's perspective, the social hierarchy and authority system of the heavenly Yuan Empire was a rather typical multi-channel model. Within the strict hierarchical division, several specialized channels were open to allow them to operate in parallel. The most common ones included the nobility system, the professional system, and the knowledge system. Some of these were specialized nouns. Luo Nin could only roughly translate and understand them. Officer, officer, nobility. These were the system of military service officials. Bachelor, technician, teacher. These were the system of social professions. General, specialist, heaven ladder. These were the system of academic knowledge. Basically, they were all rank 3, rank 9. In addition, there was a series of complicated cultivation orders. But in general, they could be summarized into 3 stages, namely internal cultivation, smelting, and innovation. Mentally, Luo Nan corresponded them with the awakened, architect, and extraordinary of the inner world system. These channels were either parallel or intersecting. Together, they formed the solid talent structure and knowledge system of the heavenly Yuan Empire, as well as strict value judgments. The knowledge of configuration and creation that Luo Nan had learned was incorporated into it. Each had a precondition and a continuation, forming a complete hierarchy of learning and research. The special point here was that the innovation in the cultivation system was often confused with the ladder to heaven in the academic knowledge system. The reason for this was that the first level of the celestial stairway was the most special. It was a stage of innovation in learning and cultivation, and it was the exploration and summary of the Dharma and logos of the universe. It was boundlessly profound, and it wasn't something that could be covered by just 3 levels. Therefore, every 100 years, the ranking of the heaven stairway would be discussed by the various academies and research institutes of the heavenly Yuan Empire. Then, the Senate would decide whether to increase or decrease the ranking. Ever since the establishment of the heavenly Yuan Empire, the heaven stairway had grown from the most primitive 3 steps to the 13 steps that Luo Nen knew of. It had grown by a full 10 steps. Every increase in level represented great progress in the research and cultivation system of the Imperium. Moreover, it was said that almost the same number of times of reduction was hidden within, further proving the solid and rigorous side of this system. And above this ranking system was the level of Grand Monarch. The reason why it transcended above was because the level of Grand Monarch was the true transcendent realm, the immortal power, and the study that transcended limits. Aside from a portion of knowledge laws that were integrated into the 13 steps of the heaven stairway, the general cultivation order and standards were already quite different from the understanding of ordinary people. Luo Nen had yet to come into contact with the specific content, so he had no way of talking about it. From this point of view, the initial privileges of the external neuron were set at the NCO rank for resource transfer and expert level knowledge search. This was already a mid-level authorization. Most of the high-level knowledge that Luo Nan had come into contact with at the relay station was at this level. As for after passing the offline test, his knowledge access had risen to the 4th level of the celestial ladder, and what he had access to was already common knowledge that only teachers, dignitaries, and at the very least, elite officers had. Well, of course, special talents like Lieutenant Loaned were a different story. As for the domain involved in the 2 privileges, resource transfer and such, he was still muddle-headed. It seemed that it was related to the virtual brain systems analysis and the inner universes simulator. Comparatively speaking, pure knowledge search was the most suitable for the current Luo Nan. In any case, according to Luo Nan's understanding of the ranking system of the heavenly Yuan Empire, the NCO rank and the heaven stairway rank were all fine. No matter how much one raised one's rank, they were still on the ordinary level within the heavenly Yuan system. They were in the domain of comprehensible. Once they were linked to Lord Zhan He, they would instantly rise to an inconceivable level. Even though this thesis with a rather long title appeared to be only a portion of some great work, it seemed to be some thesis or teaching material upon closer inspection. There were elements of imparting knowledge, but was it really possible? It should be possible, Luo Nan said to himself. The privileges of the external neuron were both restrictions and insurance. So far it seemed that other than blocking him, testing him, and making things difficult for him, the external neuron basically maintained a good level of security. As for the others, according to Luo Nan's personal understanding and experience, he could clearly sense and understand the information on the level of information search and integration. Even though he only saw the title, the most important thing was that it had already come to this. What was he hesitating for? Luo Nan pondered and hesitated. In the end, he had the external neuron report that his privileges were insufficient. That would truly be a joke. Luo Nan laughed to himself. His mind relaxed, and his telepathic thoughts touched the results of the search. He tried to flip through the information on Lord John He's article, like he did with the lamination interference technology. Luo Nan's consciousness became slightly dazed in the next second. A pop-up window appeared on the virtual brain interface, but it passed in a flash. It seemed as if nothing had happened, and this work, elaborated by the highest-level author, had already been released to Luo Nan. He thought that he would have to read, translate, understand, and so on, but there was none. Only bright sparks of electricity suddenly flashed within the haze of the mental plane. Right now, Luo Nan's mental plane was filled with haze. The corrosive process of the sunwheel absolute hell and the sinful poison pollution was still ongoing, forming an endless dense fog. The imitation show of the heavily chained crow and the wraith sign was also gradually entering a fine state. Bright red light seeped through the depths of the chaotic fog, faintly illuminating the outline and some fragments. When the article transformed into zigzagging lightning and pierced into the fog, it collided with the chaotic scene. But there was no conflict. Instead, it was simply projected. It was like a unique printing machine. It used the fog as a medium to brush out group after group of bizarre graphic symbols. It looked like the eye that Luo Nan had inexplicably grasped. The secret sign was a combination of the central region's pictograms and highly generalized symbols. It was as if they came from the same source. There was no doubt that Luo Nan could not understand a single one of them. Even if he had the eye secret sign to translate, he would not be able to understand them in a short amount of time. But during this process, he vaguely grasped a few things behind the scenes. The main thing was the external neuron that carried and activated the electricity. It was a few fragments of the operation of the black box. More accurately speaking, it was configuration, faith, and the great limit. A rational reconstruction of the evolution of history from ignorance to dawn. The magneto-optic mica chapter. This article had already transformed into electricity and its source of information. This was because even at this time the electro-optic printer was still drawing an endless stream of information from many channels and many directions. The information was then transformed into strange characters and symbols that filled the sky. Aside from the external neuron, there was also the half-decayed altar spiderweb and even the sunwheel absolute hell. A considerable portion of this work of the Lord of Deep Harmony was actually extracted and precipitated from the flood of information from the sunwheel absolute hell. It was no wonder. It turned out that a considerable part of this content was completed from the outside world. At the very least, from Luo Nan's understanding of the situation, the external neuron's database didn't have an absolute advantage. Thus, the external neuron's own authority system was unable to restrain Luo Nan. It tacitly agreed that Luo Nan possessed the relevant authority. The number of electro-optic characters increased endlessly. But as the density increased, the flavor of the characters and symbols grew fainter and fainter. Instead, the appearance of a configuration design was vividly displayed. What followed was an even more concrete and detailed physical structure. From the characters to the configuration, from the configuration to the physical, from the abstract to the concrete. As he explored step by step, Luo Nan's consciousness began to dance along with it. In his days, it was as if he had once again experienced the 70 hours of his life at the relay station. But this time the focus was different. His consciousness left the base and entered the vaster world. He looked at the towering structure of clouds that was like a ship and a mountain. He looked at how it made adjustments, how it summoned the Hellfire Tyrant, and how it mobilized its military forces. Of course, there was also the image of the Hellfire Tyrant, but it was much more blurry. In this way, not a single one of the 3 parties that clashed at the relay station was missed. They all fell into Luo Nan's eyes, allowing him to observe them from a comprehensive and objective perspective. Luo Nan had similar experiences during his offline tests, but he didn't understand them as clearly as he did now. In the end, Backtrack concluded with exceptionally clear and clear shadow cockroach. What was this? How could Luo Nan see the logic in this instant? But he faintly sensed that he could only approach things from the perspective of concrete images. The deeper level of jurisprudence might be fatal. Luo Nan found a good analogy. He was like Yin Lu, Snake Tongue, in Cat Eyes of the Past. He had entered a movie theater to experience the unfathomable demonstration of the rules. The movie finally came to an end. The lights lit up, but Luo Nan discovered that this wasn't a movie theater. He didn't return to that bewildering, chaotic, and foggy environment. His consciousness had actually led him into a grand and imposing hall. He couldn't see the structure of the palace too clearly. All he knew was that it was inconceivably vast and grand. There were no pillars or shadows blocking the way at all. All he could see were the numerous statues scattered about. There was also mist and mist circulating within. Some of these statues were far away. Some were close. Some were blurry. Some were clear. Some were simply the mist itself. They would suddenly coalesce into form and then vanish into thin air. Chapter 946. It seems to be quite advanced. Right now, Luo Nan could calmly face all sorts of unexpected situations. Could there be a scene more inconceivable than this seemingly real relay station? His consciousness remained within the misty palace. He did not rush to a conclusion. Instead, he quietly waited, sensed, and observed this palace. In the end, he saw the origin of this palace and what it was supported by. Luo Nan observed for a period of time, due to his limited cracking of the black box of the external neuron. He was basically certain that this misty palace was a product of information aggregation. It was just countless complex information and data that followed some mechanism to produce an image projection on the mental plane. This was not a preset program of the external neuron. It was more like Luo Nan was in full contact with the flood of information and data through multiple channels. It was a foundation of mutual compromise and passive choice. First was the hairy embryo formed from the aggregation of information structures. According to Luo Nan's current understanding, every information channel represented a type of information structure. The external neuron was the systematic storage of data. The Sunwheel Absolute Hell was the aggregation model of the shattered rules and information. The evil poison was a negative state that severely distorted the rules and information. There was also the alter spiderweb. It was a kind of intermediate state where information was transmitted, received, precipitated, and selected. The elements inside were even more complex. There were even millions and millions of living beings that had shallow or deep involvement and influence. It could be said that it was the place where the greatest variable was born. When they collided together, it would be fine if it was just a simple flow of information. It was very likely that they would influence and pollute each other. In the end, they would become completely chaotic and become meaningless noise. The problem was that these completely different information structures possessed rather stubborn and established patterns, yet they possessed a similar foundation in a certain sense. They possessed a relatively unified source, and the effects and infiltration they carried out on each other possessed the meaning of order and rules. Luo Nin could understand and utilize them. Luo Nan believed that this was a good phenomenon. It had great potential. Perhaps in the future, when he encountered more similar channels or information structures, he could handle them according to the rules and form a pattern. There was nothing much to say about the more specific things. This was because what drove these information channels to fully combine was an academic article written by Master Zhanhe with an extremely long title. This could be considered a half-formed mold placed there. It naturally gathered and carried the powder of information. Even 1 out of 10,000 was enough to need a hairy embryo from within. Well, the process of information structures permeating each other was more interesting. Next was the hairy embryo that Luo Nan had created himself. This was the process of becoming more and more familiar with the flow. Luo Nan was the central axis where all information converged. He was the small wooden stick that produced cotton candy. He stirred within the flood of information, allowing the chaotic information to interweave and form a shape that held fundamental meaning to him. Finally, it was another round of interaction, influence, and infiltration between the two hairy embryos. In the process, the overly profound rules and doctrines that belonged to the article were probed from the theoretical level, evolving into a configuration and turning into a concrete image when the cotton candy could not reflect it in time. Eventually, in the chaotic haze, the two hairy embryos melted and turned into the Temple of Fog. Luo Nan was truly just a hairy embryo. This included the structure of the Misty Palace. Luo Nan's current visible and perceptible form mostly belonged to the intermediate state between chaos and concrete form. It was just that there were a few individuals that looked a little more gorgeous. The reason for this, aside from the difference in the depth of Luo Nan's understanding and perception, was that some external objects were mixed in as well. For example, omniscia. Luo Nan subconsciously touched his face. He was completely unable to sense any non-physical sensation. However, the strange item woven from the laminated interference spirit core was indeed still covering his face. Moreover, under Luo Nanyun's mist cover and the stimulation of his highly active soul strength, it was similarly active. From omniscia's perspective, the floating and flowing smoke and dust of information within the haze on Luo Nan's mental plane were its nutrients. They could be used to replenish and enrich its collection. Naturally, it needed to absorb them. More importantly, in the process of absorbing nutrients, the Order of Invisible Veil, the mask behind the heavy curtains of smoke, also took the initiative to seep into the hair embryo of the Fog Palace, becoming an important element of the Fog Palace. Oh, speaking of which, the two were quite similar. They both embodied the visualization and template-based processing of certain laws of power. Speaking of which, did Liang Lu refer to Lord Zhanhe's article when researching the laminated interference technique? The data presented in the database was very suspicious. Luo Nan wanted to laugh, but his heart suddenly froze. He was unable to laugh. His consciousness began to wander around the misty palace. It was as if he was strolling through it. One sculpture after another, either clear or blurry, flowed before his eyes. His consciousness wandered about, constantly changing angles. It was as if he had blended with the misty mist of the palace, turning into a casually wiped gauze. It was unknown where he would linger. Sometimes he would wipe that place more cleanly. Sometimes he would make it more chaotic. Among them, the clearest was the shadow cockroach. As for the reason, it was probably because he had encountered it at the end of the battle at the relay station. It had nearly taken his life, so it left a deep impression on him. Of course, it was also possible that space-time configurations were his strong suit, so he had a deeper understanding of them. However, the next one exceeded Luo Nan's expectations. In terms of clarity, it was only inferior to the shadow cockroach. It was actually the magneto-optical mica jellyfish. Its mist was chaotic and had no fixed shape. It was similar to the environment of the Misty Palace, so it should have been the hardest to distinguish. But when Luo Nan's consciousness shifted over, he had quite a few intuitive feelings towards the seemingly random changes in the structure and flow. He was often able to find the first opportunity and make a judgment that it should be like this. It seemed to be very familiar. Yes, he seemed to have been in the same situation when he took the offline exam. Later, he even borrowed the soul magnetization inside to scare away a true god. A true god. Luo Nan's mind anchored itself to reality when he thought of this person. He thought about the reason why he had entered this marvelous state. Originally, he just wanted to find the theoretical proof that the Pope and the true God had their eyes on the fantasy breed. How did he build a palace out of thin air? Well, this sort of thing was really more interesting. Luo Nen could only convince himself in this way. Then, he confidently focused his attention on the misty palace. The blurry sculptures were fine for him, but the shadow cockroach and the magneto-optical mica jellyfish were so clear that they seemed to be able to be touched. Then he could wake them up at any time. Luo Nen really did touch them. His target was the shadow cockroach. Luo Nen felt rather subtle after his telepathic contact. Of course, the shadow cockroach did not wake up. Luo Nen did not make contact with the material. He just had an additional understanding that pointed towards the configuration and even a deeper level. Unfortunately, it was not to the extent of being able to reproduce it. This was all just a projection of information on the mental plane. If he could create it out of thin air, wouldn't he become a master of creation? There was a transparent membrane between the transparency of ideas and the reality of matter. It could not be pierced no matter what. It was absolutely not a thin layer. It was a dimension that made one despair. Did Luo Nen despair? Not to that extent. He had no intention of peeking into the domain of the master of creation. He just had some thoughts. If he could pierce through this membrane, at least a bit of it would permeate through temporarily, allowing reason and reality to fuse into one. Only then could he be considered to have understood the work of the master of deep harmony. Looking at it rationally, it was impossible for Luo Nen to do this in a short amount of time. However, this direction and train of thought could be used. He even had ready-made tools that he could use. From the looks of things, the lamination interference technique was simply the beggar version of this high-end direction. TSK Liang Lu, what should I say about you? Let's first simulate it and see how your results are. Which statue to start with? As Luo Nan was mulling over this, the external neuron transmitted a signal that did not harmonize with the misty palace environment. It was a distant communication. This time, Luo Nen had no choice but to withdraw. He returned to the plane of reality, and Zhang Yingying transmitted a visual communication. Half of her pretty face was displayed, as well as the neatly stacked ice granules on a tray. Boss Luo, we're done here. Can you check and accept it? Luo Nen looked at his watch. Not even 2 hours had passed, and the old hands probably hadn't even finished making the mold. Not even Luo Nen could say anything about this efficiency. However, Luo Nen already had a plan for the follow-up. I sent you the assembly blueprints before. You can first assemble it according to them. Okay, wait a moment. I'll change a few strokes first. Zhang Yingying nearly reached out and strangled Daddy Luo Nan. Wanted to change the plan before he could even accept it. Did he think that Her Majesty Empress Wu had outsourced the syncopation apparatus to him? Fortunately, Her Majesty Empress Wu went back to read and drink tea after she finished her work. Fortunately, Luo Nan had said to change a few strokes. It really didn't take too long. Very soon, the assembly blueprint was sent over again. Although Zhang Yingying curled her lips and gritted her teeth, in the end, she still worked obediently. Actually, she felt pretty good. Just as she said before, this was the first time she understood Luo Nan's train of thought. This meant that she had improved. Student Luo Nan had improved as well. It was no longer the murmur of an idiot, no longer an inhuman whisper. It had returned to a relatively clear logic, but it had a higher level of inner meaning. At least, that was how Zhang Yingying understood it. Luo Nan's visual communications were always on. He directed Zhang Yingying's assembly progress from a distance. Don't just use your hands. Follow up with your soul strength. Do you know telekinesis? Aren't you afraid of interference? There's still room for collaboration. Theoretically, it shouldn't be a problem for us to go in together. Hatoe. Spatial structure is the most important thing. It's good to have that shape and precision, but it's fine if you don't stop. What happened? Maintain the state. And then, what's next? The sparkling and translucent ice granule structure suddenly stretched and deformed before Zhang Yingying's eyes. It was like a flying ant suddenly flapping its wings to float in the air. It even let out a buzzing sound. Hey, the frequency is too fast. Before Luo Nan's voice could fall, at least half of the ice syncopation apparatus exploded in midair. They transformed into a thin layer of water vapor and ice shards that assaulted Luo Nan's face. Zhang Yingying instinctively squinted her eyes. Her mouth cried out, "Oh no!" But when she focused her eyes to look again, a faint yet lifelike human silhouette appeared behind the water vapor. Chapter 947. You're here already? Zhang Yingying was a bit surprised. How complicated can it be? This is just a signal receiver. The power on my side is a bit higher. This side is a bit more sensitive. After connecting, I just need to make a kite string and connect them together. Luo Nan casually explained the basic principles. Actually, he had used this move a few months ago. Back then, he used the interference waves of the external neuron to transmit to Spring City. This time, he used the classic design of the Heavenly Yuan Empire to realize the long-distance projection, interference, and switching of mental psychic waves and electromagnetic waves. Kite flying. Zhang Yingying reluctantly accepted this explanation, but she had seen the water vapor avatar from before. Isn't it too rough? It's a bit worse than last time. Let's first solve the problem of having and not having. Then what do we do next? Accumulate advantages. Increase precision. Keep polishing. That's it. Luo Nan's blurry avatar lowered its head. It looked at the exploding ice shards and the disappearing water vapor. It felt a bit pained. I was a bit impatient just now. I used too much force. This syncopator is a bit brittle, but it's easy to use. What a pity. In the end, Luo Nan wasn't too familiar with this kite flying method. From Zhang Yingying's point of view, Luo Nan's methods were already quite astonishing. A distance of several thousand kilometers and a high-speed moving target was coming as he wished. Even if there were a few prerequisites, it was no different from the legendary void shift. Using this method, the phenomenon of overloading was normal. She took the initiative to say, "I'll ask the boss to make some more for you." No need, no need. Luo Nan wasn't really floating. He was very clear about his own identity. I left 100 behind. Changing forms is more or less enough. Also, I want to learn Her Majesty's technique and see if I can do it myself. How else can you change? Zhang Yingying was just speaking without thinking. She didn't really care. She still wanted to provide Luo Nan with good conditions. Do you want me to find you a quiet place? No need. I've already found a good place. Huh. Luo Nan's blurry and weak outline of water vapor extended his arm and pointed at a sealed cabin wall. That's the engine room. Outside. Outside, the humidity of the air above the Pacific Ocean is quite ideal. Cloudy weather is the best. Luo Nan didn't wait for Zhang Yingying to react before asking, "Approximately when will we arrive?" Zhang Yingying asked, "Where?" D-City, of course. If it wasn't for you, we would have arrived long ago. If we turn around and speed up now, how about another hour and a half? That's fine. Luo Nan suddenly realized that Zhang Yingying's words were a bit strange. Where else could it be if not D-City? Zhang Yingying rolled her eyes at him. Look at the invitation, Luo Yuanwei. Was the auction going to be held in T-City? It was just a transit station. Actually, compared to D-City, our current location is much closer to our final destination. Then where is this? Nowhere. but less than 1,000 kilometers to the east is the Koror base. It's a satellite town of T-City and one of the most important hunting outposts in the Pacific Ocean. You mean, let me tell you something. The Jadeite Light's last stop was to get supplies there. It will leave this afternoon and head northeast. It won't stop along the way. It will take around 30 hours to travel 2,000 kilometers before it arrives at the auction's location. Luo Nan recalled the world map he had learned before. He also recalled his experience of playing hide and seek with people in the Pacific Ocean a few months ago. He was able to determine the approximate location of the Jadeite Light. The boundaries between the limited space of perception and the limitless space of imagination were blurred through complex thinking. This was originally the most common situation, but ever since the soul cloak covered the entire world, it had been a long time since he had thought about the extension of space on the scale of Earth. But when he drew the psychic diagram, he would engage in a similar thinking game. He couldn't be partial to either. Once the future was placed on the scale of interstellar space, would he still need to rely on the soul cloak to traverse the vast distance measured in light years? Luo Nan hadn't found anything similar to the soul cloak within the huge amount of information he had come into contact with. However, there were pearls and jades in the past that utilized the power of perception and imagination to carry out ingenious operations in the field of space and time. The magnetic mica jellyfish was one of them. Luo Nan subconsciously retracted his hand and caressed the blurry vapor clone. "Hey, what are you doing?" What can I do?" Luo Nan rolled his eyes, but Zhang Yingying couldn't see it. He simply asked, "We'll reach T-City in an hour and a half. Where's the landing spot?" "Boss bought a private estate there." "Huh? Is it far from the city?" "Where's the specific location?" "What do you mean?" "Time is tight. I made some things in T-City before, like the syncopator and the like. I want to ask someone to deliver them over." "TSK, you're well prepared. Not bad. You should have told me earlier. Boss has a processing plant in T-City. We'll help you make it." Zhang Yingying suddenly realized something as she spoke. The blood flame order. Speaking of which, how did you guys hook up? Didn't they collude with Bamboo Pole's old lover, Sun Jai, to secretly make a move against you? I remember you asking about this, but you didn't reply. The main thing is that it's too complicated. Luo Nan found it hard to use simple, easy-to-understand words to explain this process. Zhang Yingying curled her lips. "I understand. I don't pry into other people's privacy, but you can't go wrong being careful of the Black Widow." "Huh?" Luo Nan's mind spun in a circle before he realized that Zhang Yingying was referring to Mrs. Halder. Zhang Yingying reached out her hand. She carried curiosity and a reminder as she stroked Luo Nan's half-incorporeal neck. She had a smile that wasn't a smile. She's a beautiful witch. Yes, but she's also a ruthless person who could bite off her husband's head. You don't need me to remind you of this, right? Luo Nan thought of Mrs. Halder's various actions over the past few months and sighed from the bottom of his heart. Yes, I've seen her. See your ass. Rip. Zhang Yingying turned her hand and sliced across Luo Nan's neck. Unfortunately, it was still lacking in texture, so she didn't continue to dwell on this issue and waste Luo Nan's time. The blood flame orders express delivery, right? I'll talk to the estate and have them come directly. Many thanks. Many thanks. Also, Your Majesty, help me say thank you. It's not good for me to meet people in my current state. Wait for me to dress up a bit. Luo Nan's figure vanished with a roll of watery light as he spoke. Lien. Humph. A child that lacks love. Luo Nan was no longer here, but Zhang Yingying was still very cautious. She didn't say that sensitive word. Even Luo Nan himself might not care. This was the most basic form of respect for a friend. Then Zhang Yingying walked out of the gym. She followed the corridor outside and headed toward Her Majesty Empress Wu's study. She didn't forget to contact the person in charge of the estate in T-City on the way there. She told them about the express delivery. She tilted her head after finishing the call. There was no moon tonight. The sky above the clouds of the Pacific Ocean was dense with stars. The dusky light passed through the one-sided transparent porthole, revealing to her the abundant flow of water vapor and clouds above the ocean. She was limited by her field of vision, but only a small portion of it was visible. However, Zhang Yingying had a feeling that Luo Nan was here purely based on her intuition. Then she saw a cloud of mist directly in front of her line of sight. It inexplicably had a clear boundary. The mist within the mist rolled and piled up. It was as if an invisible hand was patting and patting. Soon, a meaningful shape was formed. It was a smiling face shivering in the fierce winds high up in the sky. Zhang Yingying burst out in laughter. Then she stuck out her middle finger at the large face. The mist suddenly dispersed in all directions. There were no longer any traces of human activity. Her Majesty Empress Wu's airship docked with T-City's Air Traffic Control Department at around 2:00 in Xia City. She slowly landed in a private estate in the southern part of the city that faced the sea. The airship's engine continued to churn the air. Several well-dressed people in suits and leather shoes impatiently leaned over. They waited with their heads held high toward the newly opened cabin door. Her Majesty Empress Wu appeared at the cabin door approximately 2 minutes later. She was still wearing a long linen dress that was commonly seen in late spring and early summer. It was a perfect match for T-City's warm climate throughout the 4 seasons. She didn't wear any socks. She wore flip-flop flats as she walked down. At first glance, it looked like she had come for a summer vacation. She held a book in her hand. She flipped it open to a certain page and rolled it in her hand. Her eyelids seemed to droop, but they weren't. Her expression was leisurely and dull. She didn't feel like paying any attention to the people waiting below the ramp. It looked like she could lift the book to her eyes at any moment and enter her own world of reading. Her Majesty Empress Wu had this sort of attitude, but the people below the ramp didn't dare to treat her lightly. They all quickly came forward to welcome her, but when they actually came close, none of them dared to extend their hands. They just bowed in respect and said a few words like, "Your Majesty, it must have been hard for you to come from afar." Her Majesty Empress Wu grunted. Even the people who came forward to welcome her thought that she would directly walk over. They absolutely didn't expect that she would actually stop at the side of the ramp. "Your Majesty?" The person at the very front of the people who came to welcome her was stunned. He thought that Empress Wu had some sort of command, so he moved forward a bit. But then he saw Her Majesty Empress Wu turn her head and look up the ramp. "Hurry, hurry, hurry. The boss has already gone down." Zhang Yingying, who had already changed into casual clothes, flashed out. She strode out with her long legs and descended 4 or 5 steps down the ramp with 2 steps. Then she turned around halfway. "Hey, you weren't this slow in the past. You made the boss wait for you?" I'm coming. I wasn't like this before either." A sigh rang out. Not everyone could clearly hear what was being said, but they could confirm that it was a man. Soon, the slim figure of a young man appeared above the ramp. His attire was very ordinary. He was like a middle school student that could be seen everywhere on the streets of T-City. He didn't seem too familiar with this sort of scene. He gazed into the distance and saw the deep curtain of night in T-City. He was a bit stunned. "What time is it?" T-City time is around 2:00 in the morning. We're currently implementing winter time, so there's a 4-hour time difference with Xia City. "What date?" "Of course, it's the 15th. Right, let me remind you. The High Seas auction is on the 16th at 8:00 in the evening. Geographically, it's already east of the 180th parallel, but it's a pity that it hasn't crossed the sun line. It's the same as T-City in the 12th Eastern District. Time is tight." Chapter 948. It really was urgent. Luo Nen retracted his gaze. Only then did he see the figure on the tarmac. He locked gazes with Her Majesty Empress Wu. He didn't see Her Majesty Empress Wu again on the way here. He couldn't help but guess. Did she have something to say? He walked down the ramp and arrived beside Her Majesty Empress Wu. Zhang Yingying didn't need to say anything. She helped introduce the important figures among the welcoming staff. This is Boss's investment manager in T-City, Mr. Barty. The leader of the group of people who came to receive Luo Nan was fat and strong. The top of his head was shiny, but there was no hair. However, he had a lush, full beard. He was neatly groomed, and his facial features were large. He wasn't handsome, but he felt like a very powerful figure. Her Majesty Empress Wu pointed at this person. Find him if you have any problems in T-City and its surroundings. I allow him to have a deficit of over 20 million every year. This is for him to be effective at times like this. Her Majesty Empress Wu didn't care about the reactions of the others. She walked forward. There was a golf cart waiting for her up ahead. Zhang Yingying thought for a bit. She winked at Luo Nan and followed Her Majesty Empress Wu down. Everyone naturally followed Her Majesty Empress Wu as soon as she left. Her Majesty Empress Wu and Zhang Yingying sat in the first car. Barty and Luo Nan fell into the second group. The car started to move forward. Barty wasn't too embarrassed. He revealed a smile to Luo Nan, revealing his snow-white teeth. The deficit is just an occasional phenomenon. I'm actually more proficient in long-term investments. In the foreseeable future, I can obtain generous returns. It is a great honor to meet you, Mr. Luo Nan. Your arrival has caused the elite traders of T-City to be jubilant. Many people want to gamble on the confidence of the market in the next 3 days to a week. Of course, there are also some people like me. They want to gamble on the future of this city and even this world. There is no need to doubt that you are this kind of person. You give us opportunities. Luo Nan looked at him. It sounds like I'm rolling dice on the gambling table. Barty laughed heartily. With your weight, no one would be able to move you, and no one would know when to stop. For people like us who are careless, we must find joy in suffering before we are crushed. So Luo Nan knew that this Mr. Barty was a very arrogant person. He displayed a bit of excessive frankness when facing a character whose strength and status were above his. In other words, he had some opinions about Luo Nan. Luo Nan had no intention of having a deep conversation with him. Just at this time, lights pierced through the darkness. Luo Nan looked against the headlights, and he could faintly see a flying car going up the winding mountain road of the estate. Meng Chong, the head of security for the Castle Financial Group, said he came under your orders. Oh, that's right. Meng Chong had already entered the range of Luo Nan's senses as they spoke. Barty said, "The conditions of the Manor's reception room aren't bad. There's no need. Just wait here for him." They just so happened to pass a fork in the road. Her Majesty Empress Wu's car turned toward a certain building complex above. Luo Nan let the driver stop the car at the intersection. As long as Meng Chong walked along the road, he would definitely meet him here. Barty looked at his watch. That Supervisor Meng would need around 1 minute to go around this winding road. This is just the beginning. Luo Nan felt that this bald, bearded man was a bit talkative, so he didn't say anything. He just shot a glance at Barty. Barty's smile seeped out from his thick beard. Perhaps it was because of this that there seemed to be a lot more to it. From now until the start of the High Seas auction, there will be 42 hours in between. Right now, there are over 60 extraordinaries who have been confirmed to participate in the Round Table Conference. Forgive me for speaking bluntly, but you need to do some homework in order to obtain the support of over half of them. Luo Nan still didn't speak, but his eyebrows jumped up slightly. He heard Barty say, "You've been working in T-City for many years, managing this estate. Not only do you have professional service personnel, facilities, and a few channels. Mr. Luo Nan, there are some people who wish to speak with you." Some people. Luo Nan looked at another fork in the road. The car carrying Her Majesty Empress Wu had already disappeared into the night. Was this Her Majesty Empress Wu's intention? Luo Nan was silent for a few seconds. The scene of his conversation with Her Majesty Empress Wu rushed through his mind like flowing water. Then he came to a conclusion. Impossible. Her Majesty Empress Wu had clearly pointed out that Luo Nan was seriously lagging behind in his studies as a sociopath. The implication was that she didn't expect Luo Nan to be of any use in this field. Luo Nan had asked Her Majesty Empress Wu for help in making up for this shortcoming. The two sides had already discussed the conditions, even if the terms were a bit cloudy and misty. Luo Nan's gaze turned to Barty, and he determined the nature of this person. This was a broker, a very powerful broker. Her Majesty Empress Wu clearly knew this. Her general meaning was that this person would be useful, but she certainly wouldn't be following this fellow's footsteps. As for how to use this person, Luo Nan thought as he slowly shook his head. I lack confidence in my eloquence. In addition, I can't arrange my time. Barty laughed very brightly. Mr. Luo Nan, the role of professionals is to help guests like you, to make more efficient use of their time and various resources. Really? Time for experiments can be divided? This is a very unique schedule. Barty was clearly stunned for a moment, but he soon revealed a smile. But there's always a way. The illumination light streaked over, sweeping across Barty's face. Luo Nan's face was probably the same. Meng Chong arrived. The golf cart stopped at a fork in the road, and someone got out from the driver's seat. It was Meng Chong. He wore a leather jacket and jeans. His appearance was neat and tidy, and the first impression he gave others was that he was swift and fierce. He was quite in line with his status as a powerful, fleshly expert. Luo Nan got off the golf cart as well. He was no stranger to Meng Chong. Even though he didn't know much about Meng Chong before, he had spent half a year fiddling with the Blood Soul Temple from time to time. He had observed and even guided the daily operation of the abyssal region's solidified configuration. In Luo Nan's eyes, Meng Chong was like a sealed furnace. The outside was already scalding, but the inside was hiding an even more fatal heat. It was a high temperature that could melt metal. Meng Chong was a dangerous person worth paying attention to. Of course, Meng Chong's feelings were different. Meng Chong's face was expressionless right now. He bowed to Luo Nan, but he didn't say anything. He was different from Mrs. Halder and Yin Lu. This was the first time he met Luo Nan and the faintly discernible Mr. Mo. He had yet to find a suitable way to interact with them, but in the end he had to speak. After pausing for 2 seconds, he still chose to address her in the same manner as Yin Lu. Sir, the 4 base numbers for each of the 2 types are ready. Meng Chong skipped the pleasantries and went straight to the point. When he saw an outsider like Barty, he hid the word syncopator and showed his cautious and experienced side. He turned to the back of the car as he spoke. Luo Nan walked over, and Barty followed behind him as if nothing had happened. Luo Nan ignored Meng Chong. Nan did not respond, nor did he say anything. He opened the trunk, and there were 2 boxes side by side, one big and one small. Meng Chong opened the smaller one. Inside were 4 cylinders the size of an ordinary pen holder. 2 of them were made of wood, while the other 2 were made of metal. Luo Nan didn't need to open them to look. He just needed to sweep his soul strength to know that all 4 cylinders contained scintometers. It was just that the wooden cylinders were made from mutant skeletons, and the metal cylinders were made from some sort of special memory alloy. There are 200 in each cylinder. The number Meng Chong reported was quite a bit more than the base number Luo Nan needed. But this was normal. After all, there were no quality inspection standards. There was always a question of quality. Luo Nan opened one of the metal cylinders and poured out all the alloy granules within. He dangerously placed them on his palm, and then he carefully closed them. He rubbed them between his palm and fingers, emitting a slight sound. In the span of a breath, These little toys the size of rice grains seemed to come alive. Their bodies swelled, transforming into an insect-like form. There were even wing-shaped flakes on their sides that vibrated. They passed through the gaps between Luo Nan's fingers and returned to the cylinder. They collided with the walls of the cylinder and made rustling sounds. This continued in succession for half a minute before they could be considered to have returned to their nest. But there was a considerable portion, around 50 or so, that simply slipped through the gaps between Luo Nan's fingers and fell all over the ground. These were the ones that Luo Nan didn't have much success with in his transformation and control. They were eliminated by Luo Nan. The margin he left behind really did show its use. Barty and Meng Chong's gazes overcame the darkness of the night to sweep a few glances over the dark ground. The only difference was that Barty didn't make any follow-up movements. Meng Chong immediately bent down and picked up a few of the granules from the ground. He placed them in his palm, took a photo, and prepared to send it back to the processing plant for future reference and improvement. Luo Nan ignored the actions of the two. He picked up another cylinder and did the same thing. He tested every cylinder and eliminated 50 to 60 granules from each cylinder. One of the cylinders didn't even have enough bone materials to form a base number. The quality of quality wasn't ideal. Compared to the Martial Emperor Sakamoto, which was still embedded in the vapor clone, the difference was quite obvious. Meng Chong could only admit his mistake when he saw this. "Sir, I'm sorry. It's nothing. It's to be expected." The difference between Earth's materials and the Heavenly Yuan Empires was obvious. Plus, the standard version of the Heavenly Yuan Empire had a built-in microchip for every syncopator. It could be adjusted intelligently, reducing the burden of control by quite a bit. Luo Nan didn't have this condition on Earth. There were bound to be many redundant operations that exceeded the standards of the drill manual. The difficulty increased, and the requirements for the syncopator's strength and sensitivity increased. With so many restrictions, it was fine as long as it could be used. Even Her Majesty Martial Emperor's refined version had the problem of relative fragility. Luo Nan was quite open-minded. He tidied up the syncopator and turned his gaze to the large box to the side. He was a bit uncertain. This is... Deputy Abladamine once requested the order to collect information and resources related to the Deep Blue Walkers. Meng Chong opened the large box, revealing the silver-white components inside. This is a military experimental machine. According to the military, it's between version 3 and 4. It was transferred through internal connections and went through the proper procedures. Currently, it's attached to the security department of the Castle Financial Group. It can connect to the private network, but there's a limit to its access. We thought that you might be able to use it in the near future, so we brought it over. Chapter 949. Thank you. Luo Nan did not instruct Yin Lu to do this. It was completely her autonomous judgment. It was quite on point. Though Luo Nan's water vapor avatar was no longer needed, the complicated situation that followed was that Luo Nan's main body could come over at any time. It was always good to have more resources to support him. "Oh, you don't need it now?" Not necessarily. Luo Nan extended his hand and streaked across the ice-cold metal component. There was a clear difference between the perceptual levels of his water vapor avatar and his fleshly body. This gave him a different kind of feeling, so much so that he had some inspiration in his mind. He fell silent. He placed his fingertips on the component and gently stroked it. After a while, his gaze shifted to Meng Chong. The latter maintained a respectful and somewhat distant posture as he continued. Also, Deputy Ritual Masterine has also sent over the design of the 4th version of the exoskeleton frame. It is currently being pushed forward, and the assembly experiment will be conducted before 8 in the morning. "Sir, you can come to the processing plant for on-site guidance." Excellent. Luo Nan's words were a bit casual. The exoskeleton frame was also used to build a perfect body for his main body, so it wasn't used for the time being. It could only be said that Lu had indeed thought things through and made preparations. But right now, Luo Nan's train of thought had already slanted in another direction. He asked Meng Chong, "The beach where Lady Halder usually trains." Meng Chong displayed clear astonishment. Clearly, he didn't understand how Luo Nan, who had just arrived in Tea City, could understand Mrs. Halder's daily routine so well. But he still responded quickly. "That's an unnamed private beach. We call it Zeolite. It's less than 20 kilometers away from here." "Ancient Castle Financial Group's Abermanor?" Barty suddenly interrupted. "If the weather is clear from the highest castle here, which is where Her Majesty Empress Wu is currently staying, you can actually see the cliff of the orchard where your manor is located from a distance. The Zeolite Beach should be on the other side of the cliff. We can already be considered neighbors." Meng Chong glanced at him, but did not reply. Luo Nan's interest was piqued. Really? He really had to go and take a look. "How about this? Tell Her Majesty Empress Wu that I'm going to Aber's Manor to conduct an experiment. If there's anything, she can contact me at any time." Huh. When Barty heard the word experiment again, he needed another 2 seconds to digest it. Just as he was thinking, Luo Bingha suddenly realized something, and had already turned to the side of the car. She pulled open the door of Meng Chong's car and sat down without hesitation. Meng Chong was also stunned. As the head of security for many years, he naturally knew what to do next. However, his meticulous thinking made him hesitate. His gaze swept across the floor once more, and Barty's eyes turned to look at him at the same time. Their gazes even met for a brief moment. Up ahead, Luo Nan had already pressed down the window. "Let's go. Hurry up." Meng Chong immediately got rid of his other thoughts and roughly packed up. He closed the trunk, quickly got into the car, and entered the driver's seat. A second later, the engine started. Luo Nan spoke to Barty amidst the muffled rumble here. "Tidy things up." Barty answered quickly, "Of course." "I mean, you still have a mission." Luo Nan spread open his palm. 7 or 8 metal or bone granules appeared on his palm. These were the granules he had intercepted before. "This little thing is called a syncopator. You saw it just now. Its success rate isn't ideal. I thought that maybe the Castle Consortium's main business was in the field of sports equipment, and they weren't good at processing in this area. So," Luo Nan extended his hand out the window as he spoke. Barty subconsciously extended his hand, and Luo Nan very naturally poured the granules into Barty's hand. "Ying has the blueprints. Come over and ask about it." "You mean, the higher the precision of the assembly, the better. Do your best to pile up the required materials. Even so, this little thing shouldn't cost 20 million. Ow, ow. I'm just joking. The main thing is that I can't always have Her Majesty Empress Wu do the work for me, right?" Barty was stunned once more, but soon the large mouth between his whiskers cracked open. "Of course, Mr. Luo Nan. I understand. I wish you success in your experiments." "Thank you." Luo Nan responded politely. Then he closed the window and started the flying car. With a neat turn, he bypassed Barty and avoided the area with the most defective syncopators on the ground. He sped down the mountain. Barty stood in place, watching the car go far away. Only when the taillights of the car were submerged in the darkness did he withdraw his gaze. He looked at the little things scattered on the ground. Over 100 failed syncopators were scattered across an area of 12 or so square meters. Even if Meng Chong's driving skills were excellent, it was hard to avoid being run over by a few. It appeared to be particularly messy. Barty's stout body slowly bent down. He extended his hand and accurately picked up 5 or 6 metal and bone granules on the ground. He copied Luo Nan and rubbed them for a bit. Nothing happened. It made sense when he thought about how these were defective products. He raised one of the granules in front of his eyes and used the illumination function of his wristband to shine a strong light on it. He observed it, seriously looking pensive. After a while, he called out to the driver of the golf cart. "Pick them all up. 262. Don't miss a single one." Barty didn't care what the driver's reaction was. He dialed a number and said, "Clear out a material analysis laboratory. Also, ask the Coastal Defense Department for a deep, blue platform experimental machine. It should be between the 3rd and 4th edition." A call came in while Barty was still giving out orders. He glanced at the caller ID. It was labeled with the nickname Red Eye Yen. Barty ignored it and continued to order. Also, those professionals who call themselves configuration experts. It's time for them to show their value. The number in the middle called again. Barty was very patient. He arranged the tasks of analyzing the syncopators in every detail. Then he organized his thoughts and confirmed that he didn't miss anything. Only then did he select the number and call back. "Director Yen." Barty had just started when the words that had been bottled up for several minutes gushed out. "What the hell is that little bastard of the Luo family up to?" Barty stroked his neatly trimmed beard. "He came. He left. He arranged tasks. He increased my work. That's it. He arranged for you." Her Majesty Empress Wu introduced me to him in a grand manner. Clearly, she wants my ability to match this grand. So I prepared a few meetings and a few messages. But Mr. Luo doesn't seem to be interested in any of this. Perhaps I should have made it clear earlier. This includes you. Don't beat around the bush, Barty. We found you and paid you. We want to receive the reward we deserve. Yes, this is in line with the spirit of the contract. But for the sake of fairness before the transaction, there should be a valuation, right? Barty looked at his watch. It's 2:17 in the morning now. In another 6 hours, we can talk about the next step of the transaction. Of course, if you can't wait, you can come to the Bitter Reef laboratory earlier. I'll be there. Remember to bring your professionals, in every sense of the word. Chapter 950. Early in the morning, the wind blowing from inland in D City brought the chill of late autumn. However, due to the heat island effect, the wind lost its power when it entered the inner city. Barty's stout body was spread out, occupying nearly 1/3 of the interior space of the luxury commercial vehicle. He unbuttoned his suit and let his chest and abdomen vibrate to their heart's content under unrestrained conditions, emitting an abundant resonance sound. It was an hour's drive from the manor at the edge of the city to the heart of the city, and the phone call was almost nonstop. Even Barty he purposely compressed every communication to 5 minutes, but there was still very little free time. And in almost every communication, the key content of the conversation could not be separated from 2 points: Luo Nan and the little plaything that Luo Nan released. As the most authoritative source of information in T-City, the news that Barty released successfully caused a series of echoes. This was the embodiment of his value. Of course, this meant that Luo Nan was still the hot topic of the entire circle from a deeper level of significance. Various parties expressed their attitudes towards him and the information they sent out. They would all have rather sensitive and extreme reactions. He's rolling around in the oil pan. Be careful not to get oil on him. In the most recent call, the tone of the other side was like freshly squeezed lemon juice or some kind of ancient Eastern seasoning. Unfortunately, I'm not used to Chinese cuisine, let alone a chef. That's right, but you're an ingredient supplier, the kind that hoards for profit. I can take it as a compliment. We're almost there, just a moment. As they spoke, the car stopped in front of a gate formed by a group of low-rise buildings. After a simple identity verification, the gate opened, and the car continued to move forward. Barty's identification bracelet automatically connected to the factory's built-in artificial intelligence. Bitter Reef sends its love, Mr. Barty. You have an appointment from Mr. Yen Yongbua of the Apocalypse Laboratory. He has arrived early. Oh, I see. The car drove directly into the underground laboratory area. The administrative head of the laboratory, Morrison, was already waiting at the entrance. He put on a warm smile to greet his big benefactor. "Mr. Barty, welcome to the laboratory." Barty reached out and shook Morrison's hand. "I hope there are valuable results waiting for me. The laboratory has made some preliminary conclusions. Judgment." Although Barty was plump, he walked like the wind. In just a few steps, he had left Morrison in the dust, forcing the middle-aged successful man in a white coat to jog to catch up. However, Barty could no longer be bothered with him. He passed through a few security checkpoints with ease and soon arrived at the core area of the Bitter Reef laboratory. Barty entered the observation room, and Yen Yongbo was already waiting there. This important member of the Apocalypse Lab, who could still be considered young, was currently circulating his supernatural powers. As a result, his pupils were red, and the veins around his eyes, especially around his temples, bulged like a dense web. They were also clearly twitching, and it was a daunting sight. The look in his eyes was fierce and cold. As a result, Morrison hesitated outside the observation room and didn't dare to enter. Barty did not mind. He walked up and greeted Yen Yongbo by his secular name. "I'm sorry, there was a traffic jam on the road. Lately, T-City has been bustling with activity again. Director Yen, are you satisfied with the laboratory environment? If we exclude the human factor, it's okay." Barty laughed heartily and then said, "The professionals you brought can fill in the gaps. Everyone in the relevant field is a self-righteous blind person, except for Instructor Li Wei." Barty did not refute this argument. He just asked, "Then what about Luo Nan?" Yen Yongbo did not answer this question. He just shot a cold glance at Barty before turning his head to watch the progress of the experiment. Barty knew himself very well. He was not a self-righteous person, but he was certainly a blind person in the relevant field. Therefore, he just observed and listened to the temporary conclusions of those who dared to speak. Even so, debate was unavoidable. Omitting and replacing the professional terms, the meaning was, "Professional A, the structure is simple. It doesn't possess any direct lethality. The design is homogeneous, and the composition of the entity is very poor. But in the mental field, especially the configuration field that he has been advocating, it should be possible to construct a relatively rich virtual component. Therefore, this is a type of material component. Professional B, no, this should be some kind of distributed architecture. It is very suitable for the implantation of elementary intelligence. If the underlying links are strengthened, a simple command can form a large number of varied forms. From this point of view, it is more like some kind of mimetic ecological model. It is the embodiment of bionic intelligence technology. Where's the intelligence? Where's the chip? In your fantasies? There's clearly a space reserved. Did you guys feed the results of your structural disassembly and restoration to the dogs? Professional C tried to smooth things over. It's completely possible to have both. Through bionic technology, a certain structure can be realized, and then soul strength can be used to control it. Shut up, loser who failed the experiment. Everyone in the observation room, aside from Barty, had ugly expressions on their faces as they watched the professionals in the laboratory bicker. Morrison, in particular, was already considering leaving the room. It was at this time that Barty asked him, "Dr. Morrison, you're also a professional. What's your opinion?" "I'm just the person in charge of the administration." Morrison wailed in his heart. But no matter what, he was still a former expert in the study of mutant species. Even though he had retired from the front lines for many years, he still had the basics. Perhaps it's because of the influence of my professional direction. Of course, it's also because of your description of the situation, Mr. Barty. I'm more inclined towards BS opinion. In fact, the laboratory has already searched for social species as a control group. Bees and ants are all possibilities. In the mutant species, Barty asked before Morrison could finish speaking, "What can Luo Nan do with it? What can we do with it? Can we find a docking point?" Morrison was really sweating. It was not impossible for him to forcefully explain and speculate, but at this extremely pragmatic level, he had to take responsibility for every word he said. Sweat dripped down from his forehead, and he subconsciously grabbed the handkerchief in his pocket. He wanted to take it out to wipe his sweat, but he knew that it was inappropriate. He froze there for a time, feeling extremely awkward. Barty didn't waste any time on this person. He turned to Yan Yongbua and said, "There must be a purpose for him to find an unreliable supervisor like me and let the news out. Clearly, if you want to talk to him, you need to understand the value of this. You need to be willing to bite the bait. There should be a certain threshold, but it shouldn't be impossible for everyone to understand." "What are you trying to say?" Yan Yongbua's eyebrows were wrinkled to the point of his temples. He really didn't like being tested by others, especially by Luo Nan. Barty's smile was still extremely obvious under his thick beard. "This is a screening question. Luo Nan, or perhaps the people behind him, are currently screening allies. In matters related to the development of a new plane, they are continuously leaking information for this. I understand it like this." Mr. Mo revealed the mushed-mouth ape to solve the problem of having and not having. Luo Nen took out this little thing to show that he has something. Or perhaps it could be said that he is willing to take it out and share it. From the looks of it, they're still reserved, but it's a qualified negotiating attitude. Negotiating? The corner of Yan Yongbua's mouth twitched. Follow his pace? The fish will eat whatever he takes. Barty indicated for him to calm down. "I know that you guys are impatient. Back then, you wanted to eat Luo Yuandao clean in one bite. But in the end, you guys might have missed out on the most valuable part. Now you're using the same method on his grandson. But this isn't the wilderness era. Luo Nan isn't that crazy old man. He has the qualifications to negotiate." "I believe so." Yan Yongbua was silent. He immediately turned his face to the side, not letting Barty see his current expression. Barty acted as if he didn't see the blurry reflections on the surrounding glass. He continued, "That little fangirl of the Martial Emperor has already used this to contact Xia City. Perhaps we can wait a bit longer." "Xia City," Yan Yongbua muttered to himself, but his thoughts clearly couldn't keep up. Barty decided to end the topic. Xia City won't miss out on this. After all, everyone is an independent individual. Everyone has their own demands. Even an ironclad alliance needs to spend time, energy, resources, and other costs to maintain. Do you understand what I mean when I bring out this old argument?" Yan Yongbua still didn't look at him. He just turned his face toward the experimental area, recovering his ice-cold and gloomy appearance. "Relax. We will strictly fulfill the contract, including the increased value clause." Barty laughed heartily and patted Yan Yongbua on the shoulder. Yan Yongbua responded with indifference, so he didn't see the smile in Barty's eyes. Even if he saw it, he wouldn't care. Yan Yongbua wanted to observe the experimental process for a while longer. Barty didn't stay long and walked out of the laboratory. After getting into his car, the first phone call he made was to Zhang Yingying. "The customers have expressed their interest. Now, it's up to the manufacturer to set the price. As a distributor, aren't you the best at raising prices?" Zhang Yingying had just stepped into the most transparent room in the castle at the top of the mountain. She faced the sunlight that shone in and did a few stretches. There were huge floor-to-ceiling windows and a viewing platform, as well as a set of binoculars that could help the guests take in the most beautiful scenery of T-City's coastline. Because of this, Zhang Yingying was a little distracted during the call. As she spoke, she turned the binoculars and looked around. A few seconds later, he suddenly said, "Yesterday you said that Luo Nan went to Zeolite Beach. It's on the northeastern coastline, right? It's foggy." "Oh, what I'm saying is, set the price boldly and have confidence in the manufacturer and the product." Zhang Yingying immediately hung up the call. She fiddled with her thoughts, and Luo Nan's number immediately appeared on her wristband. She began to hesitate whether or not she should contact him. It seemed that they were really conducting an experiment. Her wristband suddenly vibrated, causing her to jump in fright. She looked at the contact and saw that it was actually Luo Nan. She hastily connected. "Hello?" Luo Nan's voice came over. "You're spying on me." Zhang Yingying was so shocked that the hair on her forehead stood up. F***CK. You're spying on me. Chapter 951. Luo Nan was helpless. I said, "If you don't peek at me, how would you know that I'm peeking? Cough, remotely observing you." Zhang Yingying didn't wait for Luo Nan to enter the loop. She spat out a long string of words. "You've been spending a lot of time on your water vapor clone lately. Now you can feel the power of the boss's condensation ring, right? You're thinking about that fortress in the clouds, huh? Hold on, where did you call me from? Xia City? A fortress?" Luo Nan was stunned on Zeolite Beach. "Something happened to the fortress of the Bloodwill Ring in Xia City? LLLW @ winky face after the awkwardness caused by their lack of understanding. Luo Nan was the first to respond. The fortress that Zhang Yingying was referring to should be a structure that he, the Pope, and the true God had temporarily constructed near the intercontinental airship when they fought across space. He had pretty much forgotten about it. The fortress of the Bloodwill Ring in Xia City had a simple wedge-shaped structure that was pieced together to solidify the abyssal region configuration. It had more value for in-depth research. Luo Nan was able to make a basic judgment after returning from the relay station. The fortress of the Bloodwill Ring was definitely not a design of the era he had entered. Either this was the classical mental configuration of the Heaven Abyss civilization before the Calamity World, or it was created in a region outside of the light concealment system after that. This involved the background of life and death, sin poison. But from the perspective of others, Luo Nan was able to contend against the two extraordinaries of the Amaterasu order. He must have used some sort of incredible secret technique. Zhang Yingying was probably thinking more about it because she was mixed in with the condensation ring and the water vapor clone. Luo Nan answered honestly, "What's going on right now is much more complicated than the fortress in the clouds. So I suggest that you look less in this direction to avoid getting hurt." Oh my, the ultimate meaning of the forbidden technique. That's still far from it. My brain capacity is reaching its limit, but the resources I can mobilize are also at their limit. Luo Nan sighed as he spoke. Part of the reason he was chatting with Zhang Yingying right now was that his mental strength had reached its limit. He needed to adjust it. Zhang Yingying was very concerned. She asked him, "Did you run into trouble with your research? Is it critical? Should I ask the boss for help?" The amount of resources that T-City can mobilize is quite considerable. Resources? Barty's resources? Zhang Yingying laughed. "That Barty guy definitely doesn't get along with you, but he's really useful. You should know that he's a rare middle-aged talent in the LCRF. LCRF, isn't he a subordinate of the Martial Monarch? Boss also has a large investment in LCRF. What's wrong with using them as a manager?" I remember telling you about this." "Yeah, that's right. It's nothing much." This was the reality of contemporary society, under the broken political map of substantive urban autonomy. Only the power of capital could infiltrate every corner in various forms and affect every aspect of society invisibly. Policies, laws, and mainstream public consciousness all served it, were interfered with, and were bound to coexist with it. The extraordinary power of the inner world did have the ability to break this situation, but a considerable number of people, including heroes like Her Majesty Empress Wu, seemed to prefer to use this situation rather than break it. Luo Nan didn't have a particularly clear inclination in his thinking. It was just that he lacked a favorable impression of Quantum Corporation, a large capital spokesperson, due to the influence of his life experience. He didn't go so far as to have any opinions about Her Majesty Empress Wu's investment model, The reason why he was a bit absent-minded was because of the influence of his current research topic. Zhang Yingying didn't delve too deeply into it. She just continued to introduce Barty's situation. However, you need to pay attention. Barty is a rather famous stubborn person in the LCRF. Do you understand what a stubborn person means? I think I do. It was said that the big shots of the Life Cycle Research Fund were mostly people with severe jealousy. They weren't able to catch the tide of the age of distortion due to various reasons. They had no fate with extraordinary powers. Although they grasped an enormous amount of resources on Earth, their aged and frail bodies weren't enough to support their ambitions and desires. Therefore, they spent large sums of money on life extension, human body modification, artificially constructed extraordinary powers, and other fields. They did this all for the sake of using money to bridge the chasm of life levels and obtain exuberant life force that matched their social status. But their progress in this aspect was still limited so far. The results of the burners and the like clearly couldn't be used on these old and decrepit people. As time passed, the minds of these people inevitably became anxious and warped. One could well imagine how some of these extreme people viewed ability users. However, Barty, he's still in the prime of his life. He's in the late stages of pancreatic cancer. He's like an ordinary person right now because Boss intervened and slowed down the course of the disease. Luo Nan drew a cold breath. Hiss, is this the omnipotent? Zhang Yingying shrugged. No matter what, he picked up a life from Boss. Yes, half a life, but his mentality is already different from ordinary people. He's jealous, anxious, thirsty. Boss said that he can disregard everything for the sake of prolonging his life. His will is firm, and he possesses extraordinary forbearance. Luo Nan recalled the short time they spent together last night and expressed his approval. Amazing. I couldn't tell at all. This kind of person is quite scary, but the treatment of his disease largely relies on Boss, so he can be considered reliable on a certain level. This isn't my area of expertise, so if you guys say he's reliable, then he's reliable. Luo Nan decided not to waste his brain on this matter. In any case, his request to Zhang Yingying was just to be a loudspeaker. She had already done it. Zhang Yingying understood. She no longer talked about this topic with Luo Nan. Oh, right. I did, as you requested. I sent the syncopator's blueprints back to Xia City. I heard you say that this thing can be used on the Blood Intent Rings fortress? When did I say that? Oh, it's not impossible. There are some similarities in theory. Zhang Yingying subconsciously shivered when she heard the hidden meaning in Luo Nan's words. Wait a minute. It was too late. A large number of characters, symbols, and diagrams flashed before Luo Nan's eyes. These came from the external neurons database. To be more precise, they came from the data of germination in the inner universe simulator. To be more precise, they came from the fantasy mimicry technique that Lieutenant Go Yi had imparted to him. It was the research and application of the classical fantasy school of the heavenly Yuan Empire. After Luo Nan returned, he did a rough study. Last night, he did an intensive reading and verification. He had some insights that he needed to share with someone. Zhang Yingying came just in time. Therefore, Luo Nan intentionally or unintentionally skipped over the previous sentence. He opened up the sharing of his academic insights. The syncopator is essentially a kind of bionic mimicry structure. This bionic design relies on a theoretical platform. We can call it the superconfiguration theory. It's not that profound, to put it bluntly. If we roughly interpret it, the research direction is a bit like our system theory. It's the old three theories and the new three theories of the last century. Zhang Yingying, who is unfortunately trapped in a pit, keenly sensed a seemingly superfluous word. In any case, self-organization, synergy, mutation, hierarchical structure, and so on are all part of it. Luo Nan just pretended not to hear her. He continued to speak. This theory believes that the universal system of the universe exists in a hidden nature of matter. It can only emerge in a specific system environment. From a simple utilitarian point of view, it's the greater part of the whole greater than the sum of its parts. It's the reflection of the ultimate law that makes a system a system. It can be called the superconfiguration. From a realistic point of view, the superconfiguration itself is an eternal goal of exploration. Perhaps there will never be a correct answer, but through imitation and analysis, this ultimate superconfiguration can be reduced and degraded into a kind of fantasy configuration that can be utilized. This fantasy configuration can be used to guide all things to form a specific system. It is a channel that realizes a two-way interference between the mind and matter. Luo did not explain one point. This so-called fantasy configuration, which was degraded from the so-called superconfiguration, was one of the origins of the school of fantasy in the Heaven Abyss civilization. There was another point that needed to be made clear. The theory of superconfiguration was a large volume in the Heaven Abyss civilization. It was even the king's theory for a long period of time. The research of the school of fantasy was basically covered by this set of theories. This included the school of creation that Luo knew of. It seemed to be the same. He continued to speak. The syncopator mainly emphasizes three key words on the superconfiguration theory platform. First, hierarchy. Second, structure. Third, leap. As long as one understands a bit of system theory, understanding this shouldn't be difficult. I'll just talk about the concrete division of levels. Fuck you, it's not difficult. Zhang Yingying cursed. But Luo Nan's clumsy expression skills aside, the contents of what he said were in line with Zhang Yingying's basic knowledge. The depth was moderate. Luo Nan spoke again. The division mode is still that obsessive-compulsive disorder of 3 stages. What do you mean by still? Luo Nan did not pause. He continued to speak. The first level is the material level. In other words, the primordial object universe is completely devoid of life and consciousness. It is the bottom and foundation of everything. The second level is the life level. The universe has gone through hundreds of millions and billions of years of evolution. It has formed life substrates, structures, functions, and even instincts, desires, social groups, low and high-level mental modes. Of course, this includes the actual universe that has been influenced and transformed. This is the main and central axis of research. The third level is the fantasy level. It is the advanced derivative and fantasy creation of life and consciousness. In a narrow sense, it is the existence, mode, and level of supernatural power that can effectively interfere with the actual universe. A bit higher also includes the evolution of the universe after the supernatural interference. This is the direction and goal of research. The 3 levels from low to high, from disorder to order, from primordial to future, go through a super complex arrangement and combination. This includes the vertical and horizontal arrangement of space and time, as well as the natural and unnatural process of leap in importance. Looking at the big picture, the syncopator is the logical mapping of this sort of hierarchical arrangement and leap. Of course, in reality, it is a kind of simulation tool from the perspective of bionics. It is extremely classic and convenient. What it can simulate completely depends on the user's level of control, as well as the breadth and depth of thought. That Zhang Yingying found a cutoff point with great difficulty. Her voice was a bit weak. Can I record this? Chapter 952. Luo Nan quickly responded. There's no need to remember. This sort of simple theory and hierarchical division is just a basic representation. It's not something important. What's important is the logical reasoning and precise model established upon it. Of course, there's also the corresponding accumulation of technology. Well, this is all the more reason to record. Your words will make a lot of people drool. Zhang Yingying had started recording 10 seconds ago. She was also a bit unwilling to give up. She adjusted the parameters of the telescope. hoping to make a more detailed distinction of the mist on the distant shoreline. However, she obtained nothing even when the atmosphere boiled and fluctuated back and forth. I told you not to look. I'm very sensitive right now. Luo Nan was a bit helpless, but he soon returned to the main topic. Aren't you being too blunt? No. This is for the best. You must know that it's not just the technical personnel who are listening to your words. A bunch of politicians are listening as well. It's impossible to overestimate their stupidity at this time. Okay, then let's return to the fortress of the Ring of Blood Intent. Oh, have you finished debugging the sensor detection module? Luo Nan vaguely remembered that 2 days ago, before he went looking for Her Majesty Empress Wu, he had entered his friend group to ask about it. Someone had mentioned this matter at the time, saying that there was a bug. If it wasn't paper cut, then it was Gao Tianshi. Hee, Mr. CTO. Do you have the nerve to ask this question? Zhang Yingying sneered twice. Then she suddenly asked, Oh, right, what's the project you're working on? Isn't it the fortress of the Ring of Blood Intent? Scavenger. Is that so? Luo Nan had to admit that he was a bit unfamiliar with the fortress of the Ring of Blood Intent, let alone the scavenger project. He had been plotting to kill Gong Qi for the past few months, but most of his energy was tied up in Ban City. He had nearly forgotten that he was the CTO of Xia City's scavenger project. With great difficulty, the memory fragments that had settled down stirred up once more. The scavenger project was a joint research and development project launched by the Xia City branch, the Xia City government, the garrison, and the Eastern Sea war zone. Nominally, it was to cleanse and purify illegal configurations on the mental plane and to lower the rate of supernatural murders. In reality, it was a platform for several partners to research, analyze, and absorb the technology of the Ring of Blood Intent. As for the Blood Intent Ring Fortress, it was an additional product that Luo Nan used to demonstrate configuration theory during his first public lecture. Through its unique basic modules and circulation structure, it gathered, organized, and connected the energy information of thousands of ability users, forming an energy structure system anchored on the spiritual plane, pointing directly at the Abyss region. Back then, there were quite a number of people who didn't possess enough extraordinary power to construct a module on the mental plane. They had no choice but to borrow the psychic wave network of Xia City to simulate and relay the operation. During the process, the module structure was named the Ring of Blood Will by the administrator of the psychic wave network. In fact, this system was known as a fortress in the external neurons database. Therefore, Luo Nan combined the two and called it the Ring of Blood Intent Fortress. Speaking of which, the Blood Intent Ring Fortress was the first time Luo Nan had publicly displayed and disseminated the technological achievements of the Heaven Abyss civilization. The results were astonishing. Not only did he verify the caged state of the mental soul, he overturned the traditional model of the Sea of Consciousness with 3 layers, 1 region, and 1 domain in one fell swoop. He also tore apart the gorgeous outer garments of the profound mysteries of the Abyss region, the solidified configuration of the Abyss region, and revealed it to the world. Quite a few people were left in quite a sorry state. Most of Luo Nan's enormous reputation in the inner world came from this. Because of this, Zhang Yingying felt that Luo Nan's reaction was more and more absurd, but she was already used to it. Okay. Even though I'm not part of the scavenger project team, I can still answer Mr. CTO's question. The current situation isn't bad. It's too bad. You set a direction and then don't care about it. Then you added a tattered external patch and used it to create some detection and sensing module. That toy is just a half-finished product. Countless follow-up plans have been set, and bugs are emerging endlessly. If you use this toy to be a scavenger, you'll only be swept away. I feel like the government and the military are losing confidence. Luo Nan was a bit shocked. Are they that passive? Actually, it's not that bad. Zhang Ying suddenly recalled that Luo Nen had a pile of troublesome matters tangled up on his body. It could be said that Luo Nen had too much time to take care of himself. He certainly did not have the energy to divert his attention to other things. She rushed to make up for it. As long as the fortress of the Blood Intent Ring hangs in the Abyss region, it can be used as a stargazing platform and a training room. Those fellows will have to endure no matter what. Luo Nan laughed. They can endure today, but they might not be able to endure tomorrow. Zhang Ying was dumbfounded. Luo Nan's words couldn't even be considered a metaphor. They were facts placed before her eyes. It was 8 o'clock in the morning on the 15th. There were only 36 hours left until Luo Nan was confirmed to attend the High Seas auction where many powers would converge. Luo Nan was undoubtedly at a disadvantage when faced with a boundless heart of greed. For him, any bit of support was extremely important. Any bit of wavering tendency was extremely dangerous. But what was the point of making a last-minute effort? When all was said and done, Luo Nan mostly relied on President Ouyang, Her Majesty Empress Wu, and even Secretary he to strive for resources on the real-world level. His own foundation was far from solid enough. This was a fact, and it was impossible to correct it in a short amount of time. Piercing it would only cause chaos in the hearts of people. Zhang Ying's mind was like the seething atmosphere through a telescope. It fluctuated endlessly. She suddenly regretted bringing up this topic. However, Luo Nan's voice was the same as always. He naturally entered the technical domain. If you look at it from the perspective of a fantasy configuration, then the problem with the scavenger project lies in its empty structure. However, it ignores the elements of level and leap. Of course, the schools of thought are different. It's not very appropriate to forcefully explain it. What school of thought? Zhang Ying wanted to ask, but she felt that it was too sensitive. She forcefully pushed the question back into her stomach. However, she also somewhat understood the thoughts and feelings of certain people. A vague yet grand silhouette of light and shadow seemed to gradually unfold behind Luo Nan. Knowledge and power that were hard to estimate surged within. Luo Nan was the tunnel that connected the silhouette of light and the real world. Perhaps he was already transforming and transmitting a few things, but understanding was far too difficult. It was to the extent that many people thought to themselves, "Is my level not good enough? Clearly not. If I had more reference information, then I would definitely be much better than that brat Luo Nan." This was the source of all the trouble. Zhang Ying's thoughts were a bit off track. Luo Nan's explanation continued. Realistically speaking, the configuration design of the Blood Intent Ring Fortress is already very basic. However, this foundation is established within the context of a complete and vast system. It's like the 4 operations. It's admittedly simple, but if you haven't even learned basic numbers, it's impossible to understand it from thin air. After all, abstract things are always a distance away from intuition. Zhang Ying reacted. "You're going to teach them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. They're not kids anymore. They have the ability to understand. Maybe they can learn a bit more about the basics." Regardless of whether or not Zhang Ying understood, Luo Nan used his current vision to observe the example from a few months ago. The amount of information he grasped and the depth of the level could no longer be mentioned in the same breath as before. Just as he was able to guess the era imprint of the fortress's structure, he was also able to grasp the difference in the school of thought behind its design. From his perspective, the design of the Blood Intent Ring Fortress was more like a branch of the school of creation. It was the famous school of the Heavenly Yuan Empire in his dream. Liang Lu, Officer Go Yi, and Master Xingzhan were all from this school. Its characteristics were strict and precise. It was highly generalized and coordinated. No matter how chaotic the beginning was, it would eventually form a strict system after a few rounds of adjustments. Moreover, it was most suitable for seamlessly merging with man-made objects. It possessed a high degree of compatibility and adaptability. The Ring of Blood was an obvious example. From the scattered and volatile energy and information of a group of ability users to solidify into a special wedge-shaped structure, and then layer upon layer to form a fortress. It perfectly embodied the structure and logic of creation of this line. However, this branch had extremely high requirements for basic thinking, especially configuration thinking. Only Luo Nan was able to lay down a solid foundation in the Mist Labyrinth, a unique environment unimaginable to ordinary people. Only then was he able to be like a fish in water in the relay station environment. The majority of ability users on Earth, including those in Xia City, might not even be able to understand the concept of configuration. It was truly difficult for them to cheat and think about improvements within such a strict system. In comparison, the School of Fantasy seemed to be a bit livelier, at least in terms of the use of the syncopator. Didn't we send them the design of the syncopator? Let's start from there. Since it's called syncopator, they have to cut it and separate it. Only then can it be considered as working. You can take note of this. Oh, Zhang Yingying reacted. She suppressed her worries for now and raised her voice. Tell me, how do you want them to cut it? In essence, the fortress is a system structure that is simply piled up. Every participant adds bricks and tiles to it. They use everyone's soul strength to construct the blood intent ring. It is a subsystem of the larger system. Through the interaction with other similar subsystems, the main function of the fortress is constructed. Of course, they have already been given a few rules in the initial design. That is why they are called the fortress and not anything else. What they need to do right now is to first put effort into their blood intent ring. Yes, I know they have been researching it, but their research tools are inadequate. Whether it is the bracelets or the external talismans, they all lack the ability to instantly adjust and switch. It will be different if they switch to the syncopator. It seems very empty. Are you sure this isn't a shopping advertisement on a radio station? Ah, I understand. Zhang Yingying was enlightened. Although she was still a bit doubtful about the practical effects, she quickly firmed her stance. She displayed 120% of her acting skills. She pinched an extremely pleasantly surprised tone and strove to play the role of a supporting character. Can the syncopator be used to replace the blood intent ring bracelets? Speaking of which, that stupid, big, black, and thick thing gets into trouble every 2 or 3 days. And then there are the talismans and stickers. Even Gao Tianshi himself deeply hates them. Of course it can be used. It's just that the requirements to use it are quite high. It's not too friendly to the fleshly side. Oh, the built-in chip can be broken. Once you grasp the basic mode, and the corresponding software layer can automatically correct and tidy things up. It shouldn't be a problem. Luo Nan was referring to the situation in the Heavenly Yuan Empire. Based on his experience in the relay station, a well-trained maintainer could basically use a syncopator with a certain number of units at ease. It was true that there was the support of the Jade Crystal Array, but there was no need to use it in the complicated situation of resisting the evil poison. As for the corresponding chip, software layer, algorithms, and the like, weren't there a large number of professionals? The Xia City branch, the Xia City government, the military. It would be a waste not to use these resources. Next, Luo Nan gave Zhang Yingying a few basic techniques for operating the syncopator, as well as a few things to take note of when using it to replace the blood intent ring bracelets. Well, time was tight, so it was inevitable that the writing was sloppy. In any case, it was impossible for Luo Nan to waste too much energy on this. He spent about half the time he spent chatting and drafted the text and design sketches. He tossed them to Zhang Yingying and ignored the matter on the other side. The minute disturbances brought about by the telescope disappeared, and Luo Nan returned to the tranquil and peaceful environment of his research. He let out a long breath, and his gaze swept over the situation around him. The surface of the sea, which should have been the vastest, was currently filled with mist. It obscured his line of sight, but most of it stopped at the edge of the beach. Only a few wisps of smoke overflowed, following the slapping of the fine waves against the shore. Occasionally, the smoke would advance a few steps before quickly reversing back. On the beach, there were all sorts of machinery and junk scattered about. The largest one was obviously the flying car that Meng Chong had driven over. Not far away, there were places for the syncopator and the deep blue walker. There were also some that were simply piled up in sand. It was extremely simple and crude. However, the most eye-catching thing was the deep blue walker that stood at the edge of the beach. This exoskeleton armor had already been assembled. It was quite formidable, but the cockpit was empty. There was not a shadow of a person. There was one person who stood face to face with this exoskeleton. Meng Chong, this professional and calm high-ranking member of the Blood Flame Order, was in a bewildered and awkward state. In Luo Nan's design, he was an emotionless tool, but he was also an extremely important calculation node. How Luo Nan would experience it, manipulate it, and use it all depended on his heart. Luo Nan and Zhang Yingying had chatted across space, giving Meng Chong a buffer and an opportunity to think. However, he had wasted this opportunity. He faced the mechanical creation in front of him, and his mind became more and more muddled. The more he thought, the more bewildered he became. He felt Luo Nan's gaze and looked over. His expression was rather complicated. "Do you want to rest for a bit?" "No, I can." Luo Nan knew that Meng Chong had fallen into a trap when he saw this kind of reaction from Meng Chong. Ah no, Meng Chong was gradually entering an optimal state. Chapter 953. Luo Nan had spent quite a bit of effort on Meng Chong in order to make the prop better and to better approach the design situation. He had also given Meng Chong tangible benefits. Then you can experience it again. Remember, you are a big, irascible fellow right now. Irascible, extremely irascible. Your instinct is to recklessly destroy everything. All living things are your fuel. This isn't some high-level thinking or world-destroying plan. This is a low-level instinct. It is a need for survival. This is the basic requirement for your survival. It is a unique driving force established on a specific physiological basis. It is like the food of animals, the photosynthesis of plants. Luo Nan was undoubtedly describing the Hellfire Tyrant right now. It was the great sovereign-level foreign species that had appeared in his dream and nearly pierced through the relay station. As for why he had to do this, it was naturally to restore the battlefield of the relay station. Of course, Luo Nan didn't want to completely restore the scene. Instead, he wanted to reverse infer the basic environment of Vanguard Planet 4 from the changes in the dynamic resisting impact. This was the only valuable frame of reference that Luo Nan could find. Everything was done to deal with the greed of humans that was vaster than the Pacific Ocean. In order to restore the scene, Luo Nan seriously combed through his memories. He roughly classified all the elements in his memories into 5 parts. The first part was naturally the Heaven Abyss system, represented by the relay station's defense forces, various facilities, and even the space-time fortress structure. The seemingly random flying cars, junk, and sand piles on the beach were in fact a sand table reconstruction based on internal and external layout of the relay station. The deep blue walker at the forefront of the beach represented the highest combat power of the front lines at the time. It was Sir Shi Yuan who had gathered the power of the Standard Array and other systems, and Lieutenant Lu Andy who had replaced him. The second part was the largest opposition of the relay station. It was the great sovereign-level magnetic cloud jellyfish with its own massive servant army. Right now, it was represented by the surging thick fog on the surface of the sea and the waves that pushed against the shore. The foggy seawater seemed chaotic, but there were complex configurations flowing and changing inside. They were constantly combining and decomposing, carrying out rational attempts at a hierarchical structure. As a result, they were quite sensitive to external stimuli. Luo Nan wasn't joking around with Zhang Yingying. What he said was completely true. The third part was the Hellfire Tyrant that Luo Nan requested Meng Chong to play. Although that fellow was summoned by the magnetic mica jellyfish, it had a relatively independent characteristic. Moreover, it was able to support a tripartite situation at the time, affecting the entire battle situation at the front lines, so it was singled out. The fourth part was already no longer a material existence, but rather a fatal environment that couldn't be ignored in the greater context of the light concealment galaxy, evil poison contamination. Be it the elite troops of the Heavenly Yuan Empire or the fantasy breeds and extraterrestrial species at the great monarch level, they were all affected by this environment. The fifth part was the final goal that Luo Nan pursued. It was the framework and specific parameters of the space-time environment that bore all of this. Luo Nan obtained inspiration from the fantasy mimicry technique and the super configuration theory by using this sand table style of structural restoration and contrasting deduction. At the same time, it was also an experimental requirement that he could not bypass. As he digested and absorbed the fantasy mimicry technology and the theoretical basis, he tore it apart and crumbled it in a way that the inner world on Earth could understand. He gave Meng Chong immediate guidance. You have to be confident. This big guy I'm describing and the divine powers it's displaying are very similar to the supernatural powers of your order. In other words, it's very likely that a certain similarity exists on the lower level of the structure. Therefore, I don't want you to imagine, guess, or imitate. Instead, I want you to calm your mind and use the method I'll teach you. Patiently and meticulously divide it down. Find the lower level structure of the blood flame orders blood and fire powers, and then adjust it. You'll get twice the result with half the effort. As Luo Nan spoke, several dozen centimeters shuttled and crisscrossed around Meng Chong's body. They flew up and down, helping Meng Chong experience this feeling. Meng Chong's brows were locked tight, his face was taut, and a bloody light flowed within his eye sockets. It seemed to be so dense that it could explode at any moment. But in the end, the burning sensation of hunger and thirst still only appeared in his imagination. Whoosh! A long sound similar to the sound of evaporation rang out, and Luo Nan immediately called for a stop. Slow down for a bit. The corner of your eye is cracking. Only now did Meng Chong feel that the corner of his eye and the side of his cheek were a bit strange. It was probably because of the cracked corner of his eye. Blood flowed down, but it was soon evaporated by the high temperature of the bloody flames. Meng Chong didn't care about such a small injury at all. He took a deep breath. Again, Luo Nan shook his head. I still need to slow down. I need to manifest the structure, the level, and the element of a leap. This isn't something that can be accomplished just by relying on the bravery of blood. Luo Nan put away the centimeters as he spoke. Meng Chong's thoughts weren't too clear to begin with, and they instantly became much more chaotic. He really couldn't hold on any longer. Meng Chong closed his eyes and slowly let out a long breath. The taste of blood clearly stuck to his lips, teeth, and throat. He was injured, and it wasn't light. This was the price of helping Luo Nan with his experiments. It wasn't that Meng Chong didn't have his suspicions, but now that he closed his eyes, the vivid imprints that were branded into his memories naturally emerged. These were the few fragments that Luo Nan had displayed before Meng Chong's eyes when he had helped Luo Nan with his experiments. They seemed to have been dyed in color right now. They were a field of blood red. Of course, the most important thing was the structure and even the image that transcended above it. Even though it was intermittent, it possessed a stifling guiding force, an extremely high degree of compatibility, and an inconceivable sense of intimacy. Every time Meng Chong retraced, the blood and energy in his entire body would boil. It was as if he wanted to exhaust all of his energy to mend the incomplete parts, to make a complete appearance. But in the end, he still wasn't able to touch that level. Even though he disregarded everything and forcefully catalyzed his blood and energy to the point of accumulating internal injuries, There was still an insurmountable distance between him and the level of those few configuration fragments. But no matter what, Meng Chong was a veteran cultivator of the Blood Flame Order. He could affirm that any cultivator of the Blood Flame Order who saw these configuration fragments would have doubts, but they would have to be prepared to become a joke. Even though these fragments didn't represent the inevitability of the development of the Blood Flame Order system, they already possessed the function of road markers. They clearly marked a path forward. On this level, truth and falsehood had already lost their meaning. If Luo Nan was able to tamper with this matter to this degree, then the Blood Flame Order deserved to be squeezed and toyed with like cattle and horses. Oh, Meng Chong suddenly came to a realization. His eyelids trembled a few times, and he opened his eyes once more. His gaze cast toward Luo Nan, and he saw that Luo Nan was controlling over 100 syncopators. Luo Nan was moving shadows around his house. Luo Nan was focused like a child addicted to a game. In reality, Luo Nan was only 16 years old. Meng Chong felt that this was rather absurd, but these thoughts were washed clean in the blink of an eye. He hesitated for a second, but he still opened his mouth and said, "Sir, I really don't have the strength to handle this matter alone. Is it possible to brainstorm in the order?" The flying ant beside Luo Nan buzzed. Luo Nan's eyes didn't even glance over, but his voice was very clear. "Sure." Chapter 954. Many thanks, sir. Meng Chong felt that it was a bit odd the moment the words left his mouth, but after careful consideration, he felt that there was nothing wrong with it. Luo Nan finally turned around and looked at Meng Chong. His lips hooked. "No need to thank me." These weren't some polite words. Luo Nan agreed to this matter completely out of practical necessity. As mentioned before, the simple model on Zeolite Beach consisted of 5 parts according to Luo Nan's design classification. The space-time structure that bore the elements of the first 4 parts needed to be deduced and calculated in the end. Only then would there be results. Sin poison was a complete disorder and distortion on the level of the rules. According to the theory of superconfiguration, this toy could be said to be the result of messing up the superconfiguration of the cosmic system. Luo Nan relied on his own experience and feelings to attempt some post-processing. He did a bit of simulation, but it was all virtual right now. He couldn't think too much about it. What he really needed to simulate were the relay station, the magneto-optical mica, and the Hellfire Tyrant. The more ethereal these 2 elements were, the more important these 3 elements were. Therefore, Meng Chong's role as the Hellfire Tyrant was indispensable in Luo Nan's model design. The current Luo Nan was a bit like a core enterprise in the supply chain. He wanted to produce a final product, but there were a few problems with the supply of certain materials. He was choked by the neck. It wouldn't be a problem for him to spend a huge sum of money to help the upstream suppliers upgrade. But now, Meng Chong took the initiative to express his intentions to mobilize resources to solve the problem. He wouldn't take advantage of Meng Chong. It could be considered a win-win situation. Luo Nan didn't have the time to care too much. No matter how important Meng Chong's role was, it was just a corner. Luo Nan was much more tired than Meng Chong in terms of model requirements. The Heaven-Abyss system of the relay station and the magneto-optical mica required him to sketch, fill, adjust, and perfect them. Luo Nan was currently mainly restoring the Heaven-Abyss system. From the course of promotion to field officer, it could be confirmed that after the era of Sin, the Heavenly Yuan Empire had built all of its large ships and infrastructure around the Jade Crystal Array in order to fight against the evil poison. There had never been an exception. Even the entire civilization in the Light Concealment System was built upon the Jade Crystal Plane that Monarch Chang Yishuan had transformed into. Luo Nan didn't feel that he had the ability to reproduce the Jade Crystal Array. He just knew the smell. Then he strove to make all of his external activities manifest it. In comparison, there was another aspect of the Heavenly Abyss system, which was possibly even more ancient than the Jade Crystal Array and had an even purer quality, which was the standard battle array. Together with the jade crystal array, they were like the wheels of a chariot or the wings of a bird. They supported the heavenly Yuan Empire's most basic form of warfare. Luo Nan was much more proficient in the domain of standardized arrays. Though the formatted space of Earth's deep blue platform was an inferior version of this kind of collective configuration, it still gave him enough experience to accumulate. Coupled with his solid thinking of configuration, he understood it without any obstacles. That was why he was able to construct a simple and crude sand table model that possessed substantial meaning. He even took it a step further and assembled the Deep Blue Walker to carry out even more concrete experiments. At this moment, dozens of syncopators were flowing up and down inside and outside the empty exoskeleton armor that Meng Chong was standing face to face with. It was very lively. A syncopator was circling around Luo Nan's body as he drew closer to the Deep Blue Walker. This scene looked a bit strange. So much so that Meng Chong, who originally wanted to say a few more words, unconsciously pursed his lips. His breathing also became quite a bit slower. Luo Nan attentively watched the back armor of the Deep Blue Walker, allowing the two syncopators to flow. Changing modes to converge allowed the incorporeal exchange of energy and information between him and the Deep Blue Walker to manifest in a relatively direct manner. In the heavenly Yuan Empire, the syncopators were primarily used as a medium for the jade crystal array. They were used to make up for the risk of releasing soul strength outside of the body. Here, Luo Nan relied on his accumulation of configuration and spirituality to turn them into a versatile auxiliary tool. They were used to make up for the physical structure and extended functions of the virtual component. And after researching the relevant information of Lieutenant Go Ye's fantasy mimicry technique, Luo Nan was no longer limited to the level of mechanical constructs. He was moving toward the field of bionics and even more expansive. For example, he could simulate himself, the cold and hard outer shell of the Deep Blue Walker that had yet to be painted faintly lit up with a glimmer. Without Luo Nan's command, Meng Chong, who was still standing in his original position, subconsciously blinked his eyes. Beads of blood seeped out from the cracked corners of his eyes that had yet to heal. But this didn't hinder his senses. Block fire? The standard array was a two-person combination. There were no problems. Luo Nan used the work area of his left eye's virtual vision to mark out the experimental form. This was clearly a habit he had cultivated in the relay station. When working outdoors, the virtual vision was more convenient than the projected work area. Just now, he had used the support of the syncopators to simulate the state of Luo Nan, the rookie recruit, and Liang Luchu's partner. Of course, this was the appearance of the simulation in the relay station environment. He didn't stop there. He continued to simulate the changes. The light on the armor was somewhat reserved, but the pulsation frequency was higher. It was accumulating considerable explosive power. This time it was the standard sub-3 type array. This was Luo Nan's state after he temporarily joined Mobile Squad 9. Of course, he wasn't satisfied with a single individual simulation. Instead, he sought the experience of collective strength. Buzz, buzz, buzz! A portion of the two syncopators began to show irregular disturbances, but they were soon diverted by the other syncopators. They dissipated into nothingness with a wave of vibration. Next, the front lines. Bang, 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 bang. At least a third of the syncopators exploded just as the energy changed. They weren't able to injure Luo Nan and Meng Chong, but the outer armor of the Deep Blue Walker rang with clanking sounds. Luo Nan laughed bitterly. Sure enough, it still wouldn't work. Sir Shi Yuan and Lieutenant Liu Andy used their individual bodies to converge the vast power of the relay station and the standard array of over 10,000 soldiers and soldiers. They were undoubtedly on the level of a senior lord. Even though Luo Nan was able to grasp a bit of the train of thought of the collective configuration, there was a world of difference in the base number of units from a single, Deep Blue Walker and the crude models that followed it. Without a foundation, There was no way to talk about structures, levels, or leaps. Yes, this was the predicament of not being able to find an upstream supplier. Should I think of another method? The syncopators seemed to be pretty much ruined. Luo Nan scratched his head. He prepared to clean up the mess, but he saw Meng Chong staring at him. What's wrong? The order isn't interested? Meng Chong shook his head. The beads of blood from the corner of his eyes flew off to who knows where. At the same time, he tried to lean forward with his ramrod straight body. He was a bit embarrassed, but he was more serious. I was just thinking. I don't understand Sir's teachings. I might not be able to convey them properly. Otherwise, Sir could come to the order to teach and let the members of the order see Sir's graceful bearing. It was really hard for Meng Chong to say these half-literate words. Luo Nan discussed the matter as it stood. You don't understand? Which part? This. If it was possible, Meng Chong naturally hoped that Luo Nan would speak from beginning to end. It would be best if he could speak until Meng Chong completely understood. Of course, it would be even better if Meng Chong could directly tell him the standard answer. Luo Nan could roughly guess Meng Chong's thoughts from his expression. He was just about to speak when a communication wave from several thousand kilometers away gave him another disturbance. This number was very unfamiliar. Luo Nan didn't want to pick it up, but he considered the special times they were in. He hesitated for a moment before answering. Hello, who's this? Meng Chong had already thought of an excuse, but he could only shut his mouth when he saw Luo Nan like this. A voice that didn't ring a bell was transmitted to D-City through Luo Nan's sensing channel. Chief Luo, this is Shirshinha. Shirshinha? The voice sounded unfamiliar, but it also sounded a bit familiar. The other party should be able to sense the doubt and alienation in Luo Nan's tone, but his attitude was still very proper. Yes, Chief. I'm a student of the Scavenger Project team. I'm currently in charge of the detection and sensing module. This time Luo Nan didn't wait for the other party to finish speaking. He dug out this person from his memories. Fortunately, he had just discussed this project team with Zhang Yingying. It was spicy and fragrant. His memories were in an active state. Yes, you're the assistant designer and internal tester. The one who nearly lost his life in the last accident. Yes, Chief. It's me. Shirshinha's reaction was quite pleasant. Luo Nan had an impression of this person because this fellow was an active member. He had a rich background in military research and experiments. He often had some insights, and his temperament was jumpy. He was very courageous. He dared to upload any temporary designs into the Blood Will Ring's fortress. He had caused over a dozen accidents, big and small. Last month, the project team had been collectively trapped in the Blood Will Ring's fortress. Luo Nan's mind had wandered to D-City at the time, and he wasn't able to deal with it in time. Something big almost happened. It was said that this fellow was the instigator, a typical troublemaker. However, Luo Nan heard that Gao Tianshi and Papercut had a good impression of him. It was fine as long as Luo Nan knew who this person was. In name, this person was his subordinate. Luo Nan continued to chat. Why are you looking for me? Shirshinha's voice grew more and more excited. It was to the point that his words were a bit incoherent. It's like this, Chief. I'm currently undergoing safety training in D-City. It's the cause of the last accident. I just heard that you're here. Can I follow you for a period of time and listen to your teachings? Oh, I'm not saying that I want you to specially teach me. I just want to learn your configuration theory. I won't take up too much of your time. Just treat me as an orderly. What the heck? Luo Nan had some thoughts before. He thought that Xia City's military and political system had reacted quickly and came looking for him to discuss cooperation. Now, it sounded like it was completely different. That's right. The government's reaction would always be a bit slow, right? Luo Nan thought for a moment and asked, How did you know I was in D-City? Sorry, Chief. News is flying everywhere right now. It's coming from every level. Shirshinha's words were a bit hesitant. His words were quite subtle. It seemed that he was hinting at something. Plus, he displayed the appearance of an admirer, but his words and actions were a bit subtly out of tune. Luo Nan had a general grasp of this. He thought about this person's background. Regardless of whether it was true or false, this was at least a relatively interesting beginning. Plus, he kept the communications open. His gaze swept over the simple model of the smoke and the beach. A few seconds later, he spoke again. How many people do you have? I'm saying, how many ability users can you gather? Military, government, and all sorts of people. How many do you have? Chapter 955. It was 5 o'clock in the morning in Xia City. Donglu rarely got up at this hour in 10 years. Yes, it was also because he had a family dinner last night. It was rare for him to spend a night at home, so he naturally couldn't stay for long. He casually tidied himself up and tiptoed out. The house Donglu was in was the residence of his grandfather, the former commander-in-chief of the Air Force, General Hichong. After the old man retired, he always stayed at home, doing some inexplicable research. He was close to a state where he didn't step out of his house. The old man felt that this was pretty good. It was just that active members of the grandchildren generation, like Donglu, had it tough. They would be brought back for 1 or 2 days a week to be educated. They wanted to play big, but they had to be overcautious and indecisive. It was very unpleasant. He had gotten used to it over the years. As he grew older, Donglu also learned how to adjust. When doing things, one had to learn how to first restrain and then release. First hold back and then feel good. One had to adjust the threshold of excitement. Like this, he could fly again for the next week. 5 minutes is up. Donglu sent a message to his bodyguard, Old C, and yawned again. He followed the safe route he had already chosen and walked downstairs. The house was quiet. After turning a corner, the courtyard corridor and the courtyard became one. The lights in the courtyard and the extremely weak first rays of dawn on the horizon were taken in together. They blended together with the light that seeped through a crack in the door of a room on the other side, forming a distinct color. What the hell? Donglu suddenly stopped. At this moment, the continuous vibrations in the air reverted to a vague voice in his ears. The old man's voice was full of energy, but it was a bit clearer in comparison. At least Donglu could hear it immediately. It didn't make sense. Donglu subconsciously sized up his surroundings. He was sure that this was the safe route he had chosen. The old man was old. He slept short and light. He woke up early every day, but he would usually walk in circles in the small courtyard on the other side, practicing boxing. What was he doing in the greenhouse and sunroom until the sun was high up in the sky? Young Master Lu! The unexpected greeting made Donglu's chest thump. The hair on the back of his head stood on end. He suppressed the scream with great difficulty and turned his head. He saw the old man's professional bodyguard, Old Zhang. He didn't know when he had appeared behind him. This old bodyguard was said to be even older than the old man. He had followed the old man for nearly half his life and was a true confidant. He was also a person who had almost become a demon. Donglu truly felt apprehensive in his heart. He forced a smile. Old Uncle Zhang, my grandfather woke up early enough. Who's disturbing him so early? Mr. Zhang is talking to the commander-in-chief. Old Zhang maintained a certain distance from these relatives of his. The Mr. Zhang he spoke of was actually Hichong's eldest son, Donglu's father, and the chief of staff of Xia City's coastal defense force, Bujing. When Donglu heard this, his calf cramped even more. He subconsciously wanted to turn around, but old Zhang was right beside him. If he turned around like this, he would be like a thief. It was truly too awkward. After a moment of hesitation, the old man's voice from the sunroom became clearer. If you want him, then give him to me. He was young, but he was a world-renowned professor. It was just a matter of having one more or one less appointment letter. It's good for a few of them to be students and teaching aides. It can be considered as practice outside the school. It's better than them being drowsy in class. Next, it should be Hibujing speaking. His voice was a level lower, making it hard to hear clearly, but the old man quickly brought it up again. Don't let people be scared out of their wits. I was the one who approved your enlistment in the army, and I took care of you a few times against your conscience. But you're used to doing things for others. You rise and fall, and in the end, you can't become a commanding officer. You have to run for election when you come back. Let's not talk about whether you succeed or not. In my opinion, if there's such a good thing, you might as well send a few of the monkeys at home over. It's almost the 22nd century, but their brains are still spinning in the box of the last century. You have to go too. You should go the most. It's also because I'm old and I have more pessimistic things. I feel that I won't live long enough to reform myself. Otherwise, I would have gone too. Holy crap! This old man is getting more and more long-winded. He's inexplicably giving long-winded speeches. Little old man, you have to hold on. Donglu was confused as he listened. He felt that the situation was far from good. His scalp and ears itched. He no longer hesitated. His heels automatically spun, and he was about to walk back. Who knew that there would be repeated bangs from the stairs behind him? A coarse kid would jump down in 2s and 3s and yell, "Brother Lu, you're early!" Shoo. This time, Donglu was truly startled to the point that his entire body was covered in cold sweat. He hated that his hands were too short and weak to cover that person's mouth. The kid behind him was called Dongliang. He was his third uncle's younger cousin. He was still in middle school. Recently, he had been infatuated with extraordinary strength. Every day, he would wake up early to temper his muscles and bones. He had a body full of muscles at such a young age, and he was still clamoring about paying respects to a famous teacher and learning a peerless skill. It was said that the old man was seriously considering it. He was truly insane. Speaking of which, although Donglu's position in the family was that of a big silk pants, this coarse kid in front of him could knock him out of the hallway with his brute strength. However, due to his rich love history and uncommon aesthetics, he had accumulated quite a few people over the years. There were also quite a few brainless fans in the family. The kid in front of him was one of them. It was just that today, this kid's brainlessness truly wasn't the right time or place. No matter how Donglu tried to stop him, it was still too late in the end. On the other side of the sunroom, the sound of footsteps could be heard after a while. The half-closed door opened, and Hibujing appeared at the doorway. His round face, which had always been regarded as amiable by outsiders, was currently stiff. He didn't give his son a good expression. "You, come here." Donglu inwardly cursed. "I'm done for." Then, he fiercely glared at Dongliang. The latter also knew that he had stirred up trouble. He stuck out his tongue and was about to turn around. Who knew that the old man in the sunroom would raise his voice? "All of you, come over and accept the mission." "Yes, Commander." Dongliang was a hothead in the end. With a roar, he walked over with vigor and vigor. Donglu increasingly had no reason to refuse. He could only brace himself and walk towards the sunroom under his old man's cold gaze. Just as he arrived at the doorway, he heard the old man's chuckle. "Little bastard, you've persisted for more than half a year, right? Your willpower is up to standard. Who are you going to find to learn skills from?" "Of course, I have to find someone with great ability. We also have such conditions." Dongliang puffed out his chest and belly, full of confidence. Chong grinned and laughed heartily. His mouth was wide, his nose was straight, and his face was rosy. Although he was nearly 90 years old, he still had a lot of black hair, and his body was still very robust. In his early years, he had experienced the aberration and the 3 wars. His family had died early, and he only married and had children for the second time when he was almost 50 years old. As a result, most of his grandchildren were still young. Truthfully speaking, he rather doted on them, especially a hothead like Dongliang, who was the most to his liking. Therefore, he deliberately teased him. You want to smash your old man's little treasury? He Dongliang snorted disdainfully. In this day and age, how many capable people can use money to smash things? He Chong was greatly amused. That's right. Little Dongliang's idea is the best. It seems you have a plan. That's right. There's no need to beg others. When I get back, I'll mention it to Sister Yuan. Isn't my brother-in-law in the palm of my hand? He Donglu let out a puff, but he suddenly felt something was wrong. When he looked again, as expected, his old man's face had already darkened. Chapter 956. You're messing around. You're carelessly calling me by my name. It's rude to create something out of nothing. He Chong was the first to berate, but there was no particular anger on his face. Kids these days were born with the skill of observing body language. Even he Dongliang, this bastard, had some attainments in this. He had confidence in his heart, and his foundation of a newborn calf that was not afraid of a tiger was revealed more and more. I'm just talking about it at home. It seems intimate. If Sister Yuan gets angry, then that's really rude. Aren't you talking about me taking him as my master? Who doesn't try to get close to him before taking him as their master? He Chong really wasn't angry. He just averted his gaze. Kids always do whatever they want. They have a good eye for picking people. What about you? Yummy? He Donglu had just stuffed back his stifled laughter when he saw the old man's eyes focus and lock onto his position. He was naturally apprehensive. He felt baffled. How did he get involved in this matter? It's you. He Chong hooked his finger at his good-for-nothing grandson by the door, telling him to come into the room. It's rare for you to wake up so early. Let the two of us have a chat. He Donglu walked forward in a daze. He walked 2 steps and suddenly came to his senses. It seems like I really can't get away. Speaking of the 3rd generation of the He family, aside from He Yuan, he was the one who had more frequent contact with Luo Nan. The old man asked, but what could he do? He could only walk closer and say whatever was on his mind. Yeah, that fellow is a bit weird. He's quite honest when it comes to normal communication. He doesn't have any bad intentions. After the appearance of the blood intent bracelet, He Donglu specifically went to find Luo Nan to discuss the matter of cooperation, but he was shamefully rejected. And the reason for the rejection was very bizarre. He said that the item was a defective product and couldn't be circulated as a commodity. He was quite angry at the time, but the situation developed as Luo Nan said. He stumbled all the way and was limited to the laboratory from beginning to end. There was practically no possibility of developing it in quantity. This way, He Donglu could be considered to have helped him bypass a pit. He Donglu's evaluation came from this. He felt that he was quite objective, so he grinned twice. He Buijing shot him a cold glance. You can actually laugh. You took the initiative to make friends, but because the business didn't go through, you came back with a long face. What a big face! He Dongliang was shocked. Brother Lu, you dare to throw your brother-in-law's face. Did you offend him? A blade under his ribs, a blade in his face, suddenly spurting out blood. No matter how cowardly He Donglu was, he was still somewhat unable to restrain himself. In front of an old man, why would he be afraid of a little old man? Why don't you say that I put my arm around his shoulder and did the whole thing with him? Wow. He Dongliang's eyes lit up. The moment He Donglu spoke, he regretted it, especially when he saw the chief of staff, his long face. He hated himself for being stupid. He had actually blocked the bullet for He Dongliang, this little bastard. He quickly went back to make up for it. It's just a description. That guy has a weird temper, and it's not easy to get close to him. But these few months, I've been hanging out with his friends in the circle. 2nd brother Xia, 3rd brother Hu, bamboo pole, paper cut, octopus. You can't just mess around with 1 or 2 of them. He Buijing commented coldly, a wine and meat friend. I'll endure my ass. If He Donglu was truly afraid of his father, then he wouldn't be a big silk pants right now. He immediately rolled his eyes. If I want to be friends until the end of my life, I still need you to make up your mind, no? He Buojing's face truly darkened. Shooting your mouth off. You think yourself clever. In the end, He Dongliang was young and inexperienced. He was a bit muddle-headed. He Chong waved his hand. Go train. Good habits can't be easily changed. Bad habits can't become inertia. Oh. But the master you want most likely won't have the time to teach you. You have to ponder a bit more. He Dongliang gave a thumbs up. I know. I have a backup plan. He Chong laughed in spite of himself. You even have a plan B? Of course. Isn't there an old saying? If I can't be his disciple, I'll be his junior. He has a master, even though he only teaches him body arts. The room was silent for a second. He Chong slapped his thigh and laughed. In your dreams. Get the hell out of here. He was really driving him away. He Dongliang had long wanted to slip away. How could he care about showing off after receiving the imperial edict? He didn't care about his own cousin. He turned around and ran. He Chong's gaze turned to He Buojing after the little fellow ran out the door. He said, You unenlightened brat. You're in high spirits. You're just watching the excitement. Those who have truly entered the door probably only hate that their brains aren't enough. If you're going to send people, then send elites and properly learn things. He Buojing grunted. He could hear that he was still a bit hesitant. He Donglu curled his lips. It was just that this little action was discovered by his father. He Buojing had always found this son of his to be an eyesore. He immediately reprimanded. Let's not talk about other families. You can only dig out some unbearable things from your eyes. He Donglu was already in a bad mood. Now he was hit in the face with a stick. He was clearly being used as a punching bag. He couldn't hold it in any longer. His temper flared up and he laughed. No matter how unbearable I am, I can still be considered a candid dog-meat friend. When he returns to Xia City, I'll find a chance to set up a party. I'll invite him a few times. He'll have to give me some face. I'm a hedonistic son of rich parents. Do you think there are 5 families in and out of Xia City that can do this? This also includes Xia, Hu, and the others who are already in the circle. That's right, he's doing this for the sake of his older sister. But he can't stand us having strings swinging back and forth, right? He Donglu's voice immediately dropped an octave, but his mouth still couldn't be sealed. You. The main character doesn't care about what we're bickering about, but the hearts of the people around us are as clear as snow. We're just relying on my older sister's branch for our friendship. But don't treat her as if she's truly surnamed He. Get lost. I'll get lost. I'll get lost. Young master He Donglu's spirit rose. He had quite a bit of an unscrupulous grandeur. He turned around and left. However, just as he turned halfway, he felt a slight pain in the back of his leg. He had already suffered a blow, nearly kneeling on the ground. We're talking, father and son. How can you wander off topic? He Chong retracted his leg. His face was still beaming. Don't mind your dad. Right now, he's gesticulating about jumping off the boat, afraid that he'll fall off the boat. I want to listen to your opinion and ignore him. He Donglu loved to hear these words. Even if he knew that this was an old man coaxing his grandson, it was the same. He patted the side of his pants twice, dusting off non-existent dust. He didn't even look at the expression of someone beside him. He relied on his emotions and raised his nose to the sky. I'm just a fair-weather friend. I'm in the outer circle. What can I know? I've said everything I can just now. At most, I'll add a few more words. I'll leave it here. He's a great Buddha under the heavens right now. Let's not talk about how he's doing when he's alive. Even if he's dead, at the very least, 800,000 people will accompany him in death. He's not like the rotten leaves in the market. He can be casually plucked a few times and put on the scale. I, a hedonistic son, can't hang on to that weight. I can't seduce the cheap daughter of my family. Even if a certain someone spits out his old face, he might not even be able to find a balance. Chapter 9:57. He Donglu slammed the door in anger. Or perhaps he was flustered. The sound of his footsteps quickly faded into the distance. Bodyguard Old Zhang closed the door expressionlessly, restoring the sunroom to its previous quiet atmosphere. The glimmer of light on the horizon could not overcome the brightness of artificial lighting. The transparent glass ceiling was also painted snow white by the light. He Chong narrowed his eyes and extended his hand. Even Donglu can't hide your thoughts from me. He Buojing's ashen complexion gradually returned to normal. He lowered his eyelids and sat back down next to his father. This kind of thing has always been done or not done. Done or not done. That's right. It's a joke to hide it too deeply and make people misjudge it. Speaking of which, you really are afraid of the other side. He Chong was not prepared to judge his son's level of political operation. He only found the most important part. Being in Xia City under their eyelids, I'm afraid of the flood of the deep blue world drowning me. He Buojing did not hide anything. He answered bluntly. Donglu said that Professor Luo is a great Buddha. These words are true. Ouyang and Wu Jiong must be worshipped well. But you also know that no matter how strong they are still golden bodies under the heavens. Li Wei, on the other hand, has to look beyond the heavens. He Chong opened his mouth wide and laughed hoarsely, a nest of toads looking at the sky from the bottom of a well, but they still have a human brain. That's quite amazing. This was clearly not a good evaluation. He Buojing could only pretend not to hear, but He Chong would not let him off so easily. In your eyes, what is the current situation? What do you want it to become? Crane and clam fight. Fisherman reaps the benefits? When immortals fight, mortals suffer. Or are you saying that you want to play the legend of the three kingdoms? He Buojing had yet to think of how to answer when He Chong said, "Last night Joseph contacted me." Lieutenant General Joseph. In this circle, it was impossible to cause a misunderstanding when Joseph was mentioned, even if it was a common name. After all, there was only one person in the world who could be stationed at the forward base on Europa and become the next marshal of the aerospace army. He Buojing was immediately startled. What did he say? Just some gossip. Nothing too substantial. But why don't you find it strange that Joseph didn't call you? Why did he call me a retired old man? After 2 seconds, He Buojing replied, "You are his former superior, and in the military world, no, in every aspect, you are still the pillar of the He family." He Chong grinned again. Looking at the situation, I should throw half of my wealth into the LCRF and struggle for another 30 to 50 years, instead of taking care of these flowers and plants at home. But I'm old and retired. Sooner or later, there will be a day when I don't even have the strength to pull your ears. Before that, I have to remind you that as soldiers, apart from plain politics, we also need to know how to fight a war. Dad, He Chong pursed his lips. Suddenly, he raised his leg and kicked his son hard in the face. You're still in coastal defense, and you're the chief of staff. Are you clear about the enemy? Have you figured out the level yet? Did you get the location right? How big were they? If you don't understand these things, you're not even qualified to be a staff officer, let alone fight a war. He Donglo's footsteps were hurried as he rushed out of the main entrance. He finally had the courage to look back. Luckily, he didn't see the little old man send people to capture him. Only then did he let out a sigh of relief. At this time, his car had already arrived by his side without a sound. The car door automatically opened. He Donglu let out a breath and sat in the back seat. His personal bodyguard, Old C, was already sitting upright on the other side. He silently bowed in greeting. Baocheng, the driver in front, turned his head and asked, "Master Lu, where are you going today?" He Donglu sighed. He was inexplicably bored to death. He didn't want to talk, but at this time he glanced to the side and saw the video system in the back of the car turn on. This was nothing. He had spent quite a bit of time inside. His bodyguard and driver watched movies and played games to pass the time was nothing. It was just that, "Hey, this guy!" He Donglu pointed at the projection screen and shouted. It wasn't the inexperienced young man that the camera pointed at, Luo Nan, who caused him to be reprimanded and criticized. Old Si responded, "Apologies, Master Lu, He Donglu didn't care about this. He pointed and asked, "Is this a video from before? That can't be right." "No, it's a live broadcast." "Huh. This is an internal channel of the military. It's mainly targeted at burners. News travels quite fast. There are also people doing live broadcasts of situations that don't involve secrets." He Donglu interrupted him and went straight to the point. "In T-City, Xia City's military did this." Old Si was slightly startled, but he immediately confirmed, "It's in T-City. The host is Major Shurshinha. He's currently training in T-City. He received a temporary order to cooperate with Professor Luo to carry out an experiment. It's not secret. To be precise, he obtained Professor Luo's permission to record and broadcast." That fast? He Donglu was truly shocked. Didn't the old man and the little old man not decide to give it to anyone? "They've already started?" "Not yet. The personnel aren't all here yet. It's just a trailer right now." He Donglu rolled his eyes. The military is also playing this kind of game. Honestly speaking, from He Donglu's point of view, the live broadcast over there was too straight. It lacked technique and didn't have any content for the time being. It just followed behind Luo Nan's, and watched how he played with the debris and sand on the beach. There was really nothing to write home about. But looking at it from the most realistic perspective, the current Luo Nan could cause chaos in the He family with just a name from several thousand kilometers away. Naturally, he had the qualifications to do so. Old Si, a calm character, had opened up a live broadcast room and continued to pay attention. The military's live broadcast didn't have a count of the number of viewers, but for Old Si to be alarmed, it couldn't be that small. If this was in the past, young master, he would most likely spit at this sort of thing. It would be hard to avoid a few sour words, but he had just stood up for that fellow at home. He couldn't turn the situation around for a while. "Professor Luo." "Cough. What's Luo Nan's situation right now?" "I'm saying, you're looking at him with such eagerness. What's his position in your circle?" Old Si was silent for a moment before replying. "This isn't something I can evaluate." "So what if I talk about it?" Of course, He Donglu wasn't satisfied with this answer. He was just about to continue questioning when he saw Luo Nan start to converse with that Major Sure something on the live broadcast screen. Under the influence of the whistling of the sea breeze and the crashing of the tide, the sound quality could only be described as okay. One could hear it clearly, but one couldn't understand it. It was normal for a layman to not understand. He Donglu wasn't surprised. He just asked Old Si, "Tell me, what's he talking about right now?" Chapter 958. Old Si grunted. "Shurshinha is asking Professor Luo how to arrange his time in a while, how he needs the people coming later to cooperate, and what effect he wants to achieve." Professor Luo said that the experiment on the beach is only the first step. He might need to go to the sea to see the results. "Stop!" He Donglu promptly called a halt to this meaningless transfer that treated him like an idiot. "You don't need to translate this. I can understand. I want to know about the more specialized things." Old Si hesitated for a moment before changing the direction of translation. According to what Professor Luo said earlier, his experiment this time is based on a type of fantasy configuration theory. But this time, he isn't prepared to involve too much theory. Instead, he is going to demonstrate a configuration that leans toward practicality. In fact, this isn't a lecture. It's just an impromptu, live broadcast of the experiment. He won't specifically explain it. When the time comes, it will depend on each person's ability to understand. You don't need to explain this. He Donglu powerlessly waved his hand. Could it be that he was acting like a retard? "I just want to figure it out. Is there any value in what he is expressing right now? How does it compare to the ring of blood and intent from last time? Forget it. I'll just ask an expert. It was really too difficult to ask a professional bodyguard to explain extraordinary theory. He Donglu tossed and turned for a long time before he finally found the correct train of thought. He began to flip through his address book, considering which ability user he knew was more like an expert. Yes, it was more reliable to find the circle around Luo Nand at this time. It was also more suitable to close the distance between them. Within the circle he worked hard to manage, the one with the highest cultivation was undoubtedly Bamboo Pole. Moreover, he was also on the mental side. He was just right. But, the important turning point had to be emphasized 3 times. That fellow Bamboo Pole appeared to be greasy and lecherous, but he was actually impervious to everything. He was shrewd and powerful. During this period of time, his status in the Xia City branch had risen with the tide as he entered the architect sequence. His influence was rapidly rising. He Donglu was a bit apprehensive to communicate with him alone. He didn't feel that he could take advantage of him. How about he switched to someone else? The names on the address book skipped over a few grids as they quickly swept past. As for the others, they either didn't have a professional match or they didn't have a good personality. They could drink and chat, but it seemed that they weren't friends yet when it came to asking professional questions. After thinking it over, Hidonglo 2 figures appeared in Lu Cheng's mind. One was Xie Junping. That fellow had become an ability user. He'd practically broken away from the circle of Xia City's hedonistic playboys. But his family background was there, and he was in the business circle of Xia City. The He family's name was still useful to him. As for his cultivation, it didn't seem to be too good. However, he had a good teacher, so he should be able to make it. As for the other person, He Donglu almost didn't think of him at first. It was only when he saw the address book that he made the connection. That chubby, ordinary-looking, middle-aged uncle. It was too cruel to put it that way. He seemed to be a loner. He didn't remember his real name. He only knew that his nickname was Papercut. This person didn't stand out in Luo Nan's circle. The reason why Hidonglu paid attention to this person was because this person seemed to have participated in the earliest development of the Blood Will Bracelet's external talisman paper. Of course, the main developer of the external talisman paper was still Gao Tianshi. However, Gao Tianshi was a veteran B-rank psychic. His connections in Xia City were deep, and his status was transcendent. He was someone who could directly deal with Hidonglo's old man. He wasn't as easy to get along with as Papercut. As for Papercut, Hidonglu knew after a few encounters. He had a kind face but a soft heart. He was honest, patient, and easy to bully. It was just that his cultivation was mediocre. It seemed that he played support. He was mediocre in all aspects. Even though he was psychic, it was hard to look forward to having him explain things. Hidonglu thought for a moment and decided to contact Xie Junping first. He had a bit of a psychological advantage when it came to this person. He wanted to see if he could use Papercut to contact the supposedly powerful Dinwan. However, the call didn't go through. This made things a bit awkward. Could it be that it was too early? He looked out the window. That was indeed the case. But time waits for no man. He hesitated for a moment before switching to Papercut. This time, the call went through quickly. Hello. The other party's voice was a bit muddled. It was clear that he had just woken up from his sleep. Cough, brother. Papercut? The other party mumbled a few times. He probably saw the caller ID and became a bit more clear-headed. Hidonglu, young master he? Brother Papercut, are you still asleep? Hidonglu quickly understood when he sensed Papercut's current state. It seemed that Papercut didn't know about Luo Nan's live broadcast in D-City. This made things easier. Hidonglu thought of an excuse on the spot. He didn't need to think too much about it. The news itself was the best reason. Hidonglu's attitude became more and more natural. Brother Papercut, I was looking for bottle just now, but that fellow wouldn't pick it up no matter what. It was a bit urgent, so I... Oh, he's doing his morning class right now. He needs to focus. Cut off all communications. It would be better to call him in half an hour. Papercut turned over, huffing and puffing. He struggled on the bed, but his honest nature was exposed. If you have something urgent, I can help you call him. Hey, you're next to him. Yeah, I was playing with the children at the orphanage last night. It was too late, so I slept here. Do you have something you need? Donglu slapped his thigh. It was said that Xia City was evil, but now he caught two of them at once. He became even more relaxed. He giggled and kept Papercut guessing. This is exclusive news. Oh no, Pa. This time Donglu slapped his head fiercely. Holy crap, he's definitely not awake yet. If the exclusive news of Luo Nan's live broadcast was only circulating within the small circles of the military in Xia City, then Donglu could directly go find Oyingchin, let alone Papercut and Bamboo Pole. Of course, this was a bit of an exaggeration, but once Donglu figured this out, Papercut was a bit lacking in comparison. Donglu couldn't really hang up. He sighed and said, just treat it as me being kind and telling you guys that Luo Nan is in D City. His words were cut off halfway when he suddenly stopped. Papercut sighed as well. Of course he's in D City. You slept quite early last night, right? Ah. Uffed. Donglu was disinclined to bicker with this misunderstanding. He just shifted his gaze and looked at the unimpressive live broadcast. It moved forward half a second, and a very familiar word jumped into his ears. Luo Nan repeated it again at this time, and Donglu instinctively repeated it. Papercut. Yeah, little bro Donglu. Donglu, if you want to call me, it's better to add brother, right? He's talking about you. He's talking about you. Huh. Donglu smacked his thigh again. This time he really hit it. He no longer hesitated. He shouted, Where are you? Chapter 959. Did you take too much last night? Who's looking for me? Looking for you, my ass. Hurry up and send me the address. Otherwise, I bet you'll regret it. My God! Papercut's remaining sleepiness was completely dispelled by Donglu. He confirmed the time and finally made a painful decision. He struggled out of bed and prepared to properly deal with this overly excited, hedonistic young master. I said it earlier. It's the welfare home. Dean Wan's welfare home. I've never been there before. What about the name? Where's the map? Lan. Lantown? I think so. It's in the Forest Wall district. Papercut finally surrendered completely. I'll send you the map. Donglu slapped the front seat and gave the driver an order. I'll give you 10 minutes. Forest Wall district, Lantown's welfare home. The car quickly started, but Old C calmly said, 10 minutes is impossible. It will take at least half an hour to get to the western suburbs from here. Then half an hour it is. Not a second more. Donglu was still unclear what this coincidental discovery would bring. There was only one thing he was sure of. This was much more interesting and useful than the debauchery he had planned. Papercut knew that Donglu wouldn't arrive anytime soon, but he wasn't in a hurry. He just put on a pair of pants and went to the bathroom to freshen up. He squeezed some toothpaste as he comforted Papercut. Hey, little brother Donglu, for the sake of the secretary, can you talk about the main point? I'll help you think of an idea. You said just now who was looking for me. Donglu let out a laugh. The crucial information advantage actually brought him the thrill of crushing his IQ. However, Papercut's temper was really good. He still had the patience to accompany others in pedantry. Donglu didn't want to keep him in suspense. No one was looking for you. Someone mentioned you. It was that super worrisome boss Luo of yours. Oh? Papercut had just stuffed his toothbrush into his mouth when his movements froze. Donglu couldn't see Papercut's appearance, but he could feel the rapid change in his mood. He grew happier. He wasn't broad-minded, so he immediately used giving them a taste of their own medicine and snorted, "Humph! So it's not that I slept late. It's that you guys didn't wake up early enough. Luo Nan started his class early in the morning in T-City. It seems like there's quite a scene. Start the class. Papercut's voice suddenly rose an octave. He nearly bit his toothbrush in half. He Dong-Lu subconsciously grinned. It seems like I have to practice some configuration techniques and give lessons to that project team member. The main thing is still to do experiments. Right now, I'm broadcasting it live. Puff, puff. Papercut she spat out the half-melted toothpaste and tossed her washing utensils aside without bothering to rinse her mouth. Why haven't I heard anything? Zhang Yingying is with him. Didn't I tell you? Then why are you talking about me again? Which channel? Where's the link? Link. He Dong-Lu asked Old C. Soon after, he gave him a piece of unfortunate news. You guys are unable to access the military's internal channel. F***CK. Papercut cursed loudly. He picked up his shirt and walked out of the room. He maintained his connection with He Dong-Lu, and he entered Luo Nan's friend group on the Psychic Wave Network through the Hexa ear. Last night, Zhang Yingying had sent him information and data related to the syncopator, as well as the subsequent discussion. However, there was no news at all regarding the live broadcast He Dong-Lu spoke of. Zhang Yingying, hurry up and wake up. Boss Luo's live broadcast is something you don't care about. The military is stuck in our heads. Zhang Yingying didn't reply in the first instance, but there was an octopus that had gotten up early or hadn't slept at all. It sent a sluggish emoji. It was all Zhang, but it was useless. Oh no. Papercut only realized that he had made a mistake when he was outside. The lower half of his body was only wearing a pair of large underpants. He hurriedly flashed back and carelessly put them on. He grabbed the waist of his pants and skipped out. But this time he saw Nurse Wang of the orphanage draped in clothes when he reached the hallway. She stuck half her body out from another room and stared at him expressionlessly. The breathing of some children in the rooms on both sides began to become chaotic. They were clearly alarmed by Papercut's uncontrollable and loud voice. Oh my! Papercut exclaimed in a low voice. He instinctively extended his hands to put his palms together in apology, but he forgot to pull up his pants. Fortunately, his body was wide and fat. His waist and crotch blocked it, so he didn't make a big fool of himself. However, he was still in an extremely sorry state. At this time, He Dong-Lu's voice was transmitted over again. He seemed a bit hesitant. Yes, I feel like you're a typical negative person. Papercut stood on his tiptoes, gritted his teeth, and held his breath. He waited until he reached the entrance of the orphanage before he opened his mouth. Share, transcribe, remake, whatever. Immediately send the video over for me to see. For Papercut, this was a rare and urgent tone of voice. You'll have to wait a bit. He Dong-Lu was willing to help, but the operation required time. Papercut's reasoning was understanding, but his emotions were unforgiving. His heart felt like it was being scratched by a cat. In a few short seconds, a layer of sweat had already accumulated on his forehead. At this time, the friend group had already exploded. First, there was a large queue with a sluggish expression. Then Zhang Yingying reacted and left a message. I got in touch. I'm going to find out. After destroying the queue, there was no follow-up for the time being. Nearly everyone had been awakened by the explosion. They were speculating, discussing, and tagging Papercut, the first-hand news provider. Papercut originally wanted to join in, but his heart was truly overgrown with weeds. He Dong-Lu's few words had stirred his mind into a trance. What is Nanster teaching? Why did he mention me? Typical negative person. Does it have to be this serious? Papercut walked to the entrance of the orphanage in a jumbled state of curiosity, ignorance, anticipation, and even worry. Suddenly, someone called out to him. Uncle Paper, Uncle Paper. Weiwu? The one who called out to Papercut was the most promising kid in the orphanage, Di Weiwu. He was also the adopted son of Papercut's old friend, Di Donghua. This kid had quite the backbone. Even if Di Dongwo would complete the procedures to adopt him with just a word, he was still willing to live in the orphanage with the other orphans in the orphanage. Di Weiwu was also a diligent kid. Every day, he would wake up early to train, rain or shine, to build a foundation for his future cultivation. Seeing the sweat on his head, he had most likely returned from a round of training. "Uncle Paper, are you leaving now?" "Oh, I have a bit of business." Paper Cut stopped mid-sentence because Hidongwa had begun to transmit data. It was not a live broadcast, but a transcribed video. To increase efficiency, I'll send it one clip at a time. Damn. Paper Cut decisively turned around and walked back. Uncle Paper, Uncle Paper? Di Weiwu felt baffled as he quickly caught up. The reason for Paper Cut's choice was very simple. This was a commercial society. No matter how good Xia City's infrastructure was, it was impossible to achieve full coverage for a rotten place like the recycling stratum. The orphanage was a public place. It was already the area with the strongest signal. Hidonglo's decision to send the video in segments was very wise. The first video, which was a few dozen seconds long, was quickly transmitted. Since Paper Cut was connected to the psychic wave network at the same time, the video was sent over. It was not suitable to be projected onto his retina, so he could only choose to play it outside. Di Weiwu, who was playing the role of a follower, went wow. Brother Luo Nan. Paper Cut ignored the child's messy way of addressing each other. He just stared at the projection area. He looked. No, he listened to the information being transmitted. In the video, there was a simple and stable background of a beach and a focused image of a human figure. Aside from being able to confirm Luo Nan's existence, there was no other value to it for the time being. The only thing that was truly meaningful was the voice. "Chief, why do you need so many people?" So many burners?